Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's David Palmer, Leo King here on HighVibe.tv, and have a special interview today with Evan Nathaniel Grimm. He's an awesome, famous astrologer, TikTok influencer. Super happy to have him on today. And of course, he's a Scorpio, so it's Scorpio season. Good to be having you here with me, dude.
Yeah, what's going on, David? Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you, bro. How are you feeling right now through this Scorpio season?
I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I always get comments on my TikToks about like, can we skip Scorpio season? It's like always super dreadful and it's intense. I don't want anything to do with it. And I'm always like, what would the zodiac look like without Scorpio? And when I think about each sign, I'm like, can we assign like a keyword to this sign if we just had to summarize it? And I think with Scorpio, it's depth. So without Scorpios, we don't have a lot of depth. And so I'm just kind of like enjoying it, especially with Scorpio in my fifth house, highly creative. So, it's been good.
Good, bro. I mean, why don't you let people know, like, how did you really, get started on this journey? Like, you do TikTok astrology, which, it's so funny in this world today, bro. Like, I'm a YouTube astrologer, do Instagram, of course, have my own network. But like TikTok's just one of the things that I just never got into. And I feel like I really did miss a big boat. And I'm proud of you, man, because you got a huge TikTok. People really watch you, millions of views that people watch in single videos, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Tell us about your astrology journey a little bit. Like, what got you into it?
Yeah, I wouldn't classify it as conventional. I started off as a musician. Most of my life I've been a performing artist. And then after college, I moved to New York City and I just followed all my classmates. So I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, and like everybody ends up going to New York. Everybody moves there for some consulting or finance gig, you know what I mean? And so I took those gigs. I did consulting. I worked for Scott Galloway's digital strategy startup. So I worked for Henry Blodgett at Business Insider as well. So I was like kind of in the startup space, living in Manhattan, wearing a sport coat, wearing a blazer, walking Fifth Ave, like doing all that stuff. And, I was living a pretty good life, but it was like very surface level. So eventually in 2019, late 2019, this is actually a true story. I got a concussion at a nightclub called Pyramid Club. It was actually called Pyramid Club. And I actually went dancing there every weekend for like 4 or 5 years. And that club is actually a historical landmark, in New York, although it is shutting down, unfortunately now. Wow. But anyways, I got a concussion there. It was a freak accident. The next day, like my boss, like I went to work and my boss was like, dude, you got to go home. You're a little dazed. Like it wasn't like that bad of a hit, but it like definitely took me a day to recover. But once I recovered, I started seeing synchronicities everywhere, like patterns, numbers, started writing different types of music.
Really?
And then this tree on the East River, like I wouldn't say it was like talking to me directly in English, but it was definitely like trying to like hook me into its energy space. And so all of a sudden I just had this attunement to energy fields. But then, long story short, I ended up moving to Los Angeles about 9 months later, a year later. And as soon as I got here, the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction was right on my north node at 0 Aquarius. And so that was December 2020. And that's when I bought my first astrology book. And from December...
What book was that?
I think it was The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest, because I just wanted a book about like, what are the 12 signs? And so I bought that book, and then I bought like 15 other books. And from January to April 2021, I downloaded so much information about astrology. And like the way I explained it to people is that I was really relearning it. So I'm sure you've experienced this too, like when you got into astrology, but like there's definitely a past life connection to it for me. I don't feel like, because I'm also into like math and music. So for me, astrology is like the third rail, the triumvirate. It's like music, math, astrology are all the same thing for me. It's like numbers, harmony, vibration. But now with astrology, we have like another like language. Because like with music, I always felt like I had a psychic link with like my drummer or my bass player. But now with astrology, it's like I could see like what was going on a little bit more at a deeper level. But then I, 4 months into my studies, I tried a reading on somebody who I didn't know. It was like somebody I just like met online. And I looked at her chart and I was like, and I, among other things I said, I was like, I think when you were 13 that, your dad got in a pretty serious accident. That may or not have involved like alcohol or substances or something. And she was like, yeah, that happened. So it was like the first reading I tried. I got a spot on prediction without using transits or anything, just using the degrees. And there was like a voice in my head that was like, Evan, you should probably think about like quitting your corporate job and like doing this like within the next 6 months. And so after that, my girlfriend at the time was like, "You've become an astrologer. Like, who are you now?" And nothing against her, but like that was the conversation. So we split up. I moved into my own place in Hollywood, and bought a ring light because my friend was like, "Dude, you should try astrology on TikTok. Like, just talk about it." And in like August 2021, I started doing videos, and like my third video got 1 million views.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's a pretty wild story. And it's like, you know, if any of my friends from New York are watching this right now, it's like, you know, even to this day, like some of my friends are like, "You're not actually like serious about astrology, are you? Like, you think it's like, do you actually believe in it?" And it's like, you know, once you've done, you know, whatever I've done this year, like 500 readings, it's like, you see that it's spot on. Yeah. Every time you do the same, you make the same types of predictions using the same methodology, and they're like, yeah, that happened. It's not really about belief for me. It's just like, I've just tapped into something else, to some other type of frequency. But yeah, I mean, with TikTok, it's like such a quick way. It's like it's one of the quickest paths to entrepreneurship, I think, in the world. So whatever you think about the platform, whatever you think about the way that, you know, like any of the inner workings of it, it's like that is a perfect way. If you have any expertise, even outside of astrology, if you're like a wedding planner, if you're a graphic designer, you have something interesting to say, like TikTok is the quickest way to reach those people. And that's all traffic to your website. And anyways, within a few months, I already had basically the capital to like do this full time.
Right.
So it was super sudden. So now this is my full-time job, and I love it. And it's like way more motivating than sitting in an office. I mean, I love Scott Galloway, but you know, but it's like working even at a startup like has its downsides. You still have to clock in, clock out.
Right.
You know what I mean? So.
Well, and you're passionate about it. I want to ask you, because this transition happened for you definitely during this pandemic. Do you feel that because we had that great alignment of Saturn and Pluto, and of course Jupiter was in Capricorn too, do you feel that Capricorn and that transit was like a destined, overwhelmingly destined point in your life of a calling or a turning of event that like you couldn't deny? Or do you feel like there was a struggle to make the choice to do this? Yeah. So to kind of answer that question, I want to go back to 2012, because in 2012, after I finished an internship at Target, I wrote a 300-page book in 5 weeks. I just like downloaded it, and it was based on, and I wrote the plot based on Dante's Inferno. Really? Yeah, and the plot, basically, I don't want to give away the entire plot because I'm still working on finishing the book, but essentially it was like Dante's Inferno mixed with the Matrix. It's like this guy who's like in a tower. He's trying to get out of his corporation. But anyways, and he's kind of like going down the levels, so you kind of get the gist of it. But anyways, that book was based in 2020. So when I wrote it in 2012, it was based on a dream I had, and I was like, I feel like this book needs to be about 2020. It needs to be about the dissolution of like modern society in the US, because I got a vision in 2012, like randomly that summer of 2020, and it just looked like chaotic. And so I wanted to write a whole book about it. And then I started watching your content, and you made that awesome connection of Dante, you know, in 1284 versus 2020, we have the same alignments. And then as soon as you talked about that, I was like, holy shit, like I need to go back. I just realized I wrote that book as like my own, like before I knew astrology, like a prophecy of 2020. I was talking about those alignments, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, about the destruction of something. But so that's all to answer your question. I feel like the longer timeline is that the astrology was like the missing piece, because I wrote the book and I was like, why am I writing this book? And I even used like an alias that connects with like my ancestors. And I was just like, where am I going with this? And then when I downloaded all this astrological knowledge, I was like, okay, like that was it. Like that's what I was missing. That's interesting, because I feel like, you know, it was such a major event, but especially going back to Dante's work, it was like, holy shit, right? Like those planets conjuncted his north node that he had in Capricorn. Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter, all, I'm like, and that the way that he did levels, very Capricorn. And Pluto, like Pluto Capricorn is definitely like level upon level upon. And there's so many, like I feel like whether it was Da Vinci Code and then it went to like Inferno in that series, they never really give people the history of Dante much. They just say, oh yeah, Dante. And, they go, and I'm like, I always been like, it's so much deeper than that. And when I bought this old book of this Reverend Henry Christmas, and he didn't get published in 1814 because it was too radical for anybody in the church, and it was just a Presbyterian, or it was Protestant church. It was too crazy for them to start connecting his life, Dante's life, and doing the history. And when you look at like 1284 into 1285, that's when there was major changes in popes and world leaders dying. And then he was connecting to, whether it was Paradiso or Inferno or Purgatory, the areas in those Divine Comedy that he felt he was writing from based off historical events. And that's when I was like, it's the astrology that can connect this better than just like that.
100%.
And when you look at anybody's, 19 years old, they have their nodal return, and to have it in Capricorn with Saturn and Pluto, but plus with Jupiter, which is this, 740 year transit that it's so rare to have. And for him to have a piece of work to be brought out and it's still used today, and it almost, it's like it's kind of like faded out for centuries. But I feel like it's interesting you tapped in 2012 of all the years to see it as 2020. Because I feel like, I'm sure and a lot of people know, and I'd love to get your take on what we've been seeing since 2020. Do you feel that Saturn, Pluto, and Capricorn, that transit we had, did shift the axis of what we call our world today? Like, are you somebody who...
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I've been looking into this cycle, which is 2020 to 2054. So we're in this for a long time. The analogy that I like to give with the Saturn, Pluto, and Cap is it's kind of like, imagine you're at like a stoplight, a crossroads in like a small town, and the light's red. And like everyone's staying put. There's no cross traffic. Maybe there's a car every hour, but like people are just staying there. And the light is still red, and no one's willing to drive across, despite the low risk of like actually getting hit. And in so many words, like I think that that's the analogy that captures the next 34 years. It's basically, with Capricorn, it's about power, enforcement, and it's like, if people realize that if we show them a red light and they stay put, then we can turn the red light on whenever we want, and people will stay put. So what I see this era as, it's like a system of like power and control. So how are people wielding that power? And with Neptune and Pisces, of course, we have like, how can the media be sort of provocateur of those energies of like keeping people wrapped in the illusions and stuff. But I do think there is an overlay to this of hope, which is, once Pluto's in Aquarius, like when I think about Pluto, I'm like, what are people's subconscious urges? And when Pluto's been in Capricorn, it's like we've had an urge to like structure ourselves into hierarchies. But when Pluto's in Aquarius, we're going to have a different urge, which I think is to collectivize, a little bit, and
detach too.
And detached. Yeah, that's true. But I think you can see it in the culture, right? Like my theory is that like movies, TV shows, it's basically like people, like it's like the culture is holding our repressed unconscious needs like in front of us. So it's like, if you can't access your animalistic drives in the day-to-day as part of the social contract, we're going to show it to you through movies, and you're going to buy those movies. And when I think of a lot of the series that have been active during Pluto and Cap, it's been like Game of Thrones, The Hunger Games, Succession, House of Cards, like these shows that are like all about, again, like massive power, and eventually the heavy-handedness of that and the toppling of that. So it's like with Pluto and Aquarius, like what is that going to look like? Maybe it's like more Ready Player One type games, but anyways, like I do think that this cycle is very high stakes. It's nothing like the last cycle that we had of Saturn and Pluto. I mean, I think it's a little bit more, it's really about institutions. We're talking about the institutional level of things, and so it's like, what do people like you and I like? How do we affect change? Like when we think about monopolies and duopolies, like every industry. I think if you take a swath of every industry, there's probably like 3 to 5 companies that own that industry.
That's true.
And so like, what does that look like as well in Pluto and Aquarius? Like, how do people, like everyone belongs to a company. Everyone has a LinkedIn. Everyone is like slotted into something, but like we don't actually have the power. So it's like there's all these opportunities for people to be like a contracted worker for this startup or this tech company. But, I think that this cycle with Pluto and Cap in general has been a little bit like disempowering beneath the surface. So I wonder if like the decentralization theme will play out. with Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah, and I feel like, it's crazy when you bring up, especially like the power that I think, and you are a Scorpio, so if you were to understand Pluto better than anybody, it'd be you. But I feel like, Marx, what he did is what happened with like Stalin and the old days of socialism is it wasn't that it was ever voted in. It was when people took over the government and they made socialism. Mm-hmm. That's what the history shows. And it's like, it's kind of like one of those things to where it's like, sure, I think we could say a lot of the power has been given away because whether, look at like 9/11 and the Patriot Act and stuff. Mm-hmm. But did we really have that power too? Like, it's like one of those things where I feel like in Aquarius, it's the people taking the power back in many ways, but it's not going to be a simple act, I guess you could say. And I think that there's a deep subconscious, as you said, and a subconscious hunger that, Scorpio, Pluto really has to go into, and Aquarius is another fixed sign, and it's like we haven't seen it since Scorpio. And that was when the subconscious urge of more scorpionic themes, of course, whether it was money or especially even in media, like, I always think of like whether it was like Michael Jackson to Madonna to like these more sexual kind of energies and figures and allowing yourself to express kind of your deeper inner shadows that were at one time you were not allowed to in society, or it was like, so that's what's so weird too, is like we're in a time now where if you act like you're from the 80s, oh my God, like you are done,
which is actually funny, because that Pyramid Club we used to dance at was a goth club, so it was all 80s music. So I would dress in black, which is like the most Scorpio thing I think you could do. I would show up and dance till like 4 o'clock in the morning. Like that's how I got my 5th house Scorpio energy out. But I just think that, like, I think you might have actually mentioned this at some points on a prior show about how the internet, though, is kind of like, it's a little bit like the printing press. You think way back to the 1440s, all of a sudden we have a new knowledge base to access. And so when I think about Pluto and Aquarius, I'm like, okay, so Aquarius deals with revolutions and things like that. But like, what precedes revolutions? What precedes revolutions is knowledge, new knowledge. The only reason that revolutions happen is because people find out things they didn't know before. There's something that's uncovered. And so that's like, to me, the scorpionic element of Aquarius, actually. It's like we're unearthing something, and now we want to make that change. So, when we think about the church, when we think about the literacy rates and how more people could read, and that sparks like different branches of Christianity all of a sudden that are more individualistic. And now with the internet, we have access to more of the story. And like, look, whatever you think about theory X, Y, or Z, like, I don't think that matters. Like, I think the spirit of it is what matters. So it's like we have a lot of people like digging into things, and like, let's be honest, like a lot of people on the internet who are just like digging around, like a lot of them are off point, they're off base. Like they don't really know what's going on, but every once in a while you have someone who digs up something super accurate and truthful, and it does uncover something that we're not aware of, and that was not part of the narrative before. So up until the internet, we had the narrative was controlled by mass media, by the television box, by the movie screen. And now it's like, it's like I am the fucking narrative. Like I can go on my phone and just film shit on my phone. And that's why, to circle this all back to TikTok somehow, TikTok is super powerful in that way because, if I have a thought, I can upload it and I never spend more than 20 minutes making a video. And sometimes you'll get 1 million people's eyes on it within 24 hours. And
it's not like it just plays once. There's something where it's like people rewatch things on TikTok a lot. Like it's almost like they'll watch it more than once. They'll because it'll loop. Yeah. There's that looping element to things where it's like, hold on, I want to watch that again. So you're getting it more than one time. Yeah. It's like on YouTube, sometimes if it's a little bit more long form and it's like, oh, I've watched that a couple times, but skim through it or whatever. But on TikTok, you watch the whole thing, and then sometimes you'll be brushing your teeth or something, and sometimes I'll be like, okay, I need to like fucking change it because that's looped now fucking 25 times.
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's interesting because when I write TikTok videos, a lot of people ask me about like, well, what's your creative process? I think that for me, it's like I write all my scripts when I'm running. I go jogging as much as I can, every other day or so. And when I'm running, there's something about, and I think, you know, if you're watching this, you have fifth house placements. Like, I feel like if you're in the fifth house, even if you have Leo placements, I'm sure you'd agree with this. Like, being out in the sun, it just like hits your creative impulse a little bit. So when I'm running, I'll get these random thoughts about like, okay, you should strategize differently. You should make your videos like this. You should film your videos from your bathroom instead. Or you shouldn't reveal the sign until the end. And, you know, I think the agility of TikTok is great for me because, you know, I have a Mars Mercury opposition too. So I'm just like super fast as a communicator. So I love talking fast. And I think TikTok like suits my strengths a little bit. But I think that there's an upside and a downside to this too, because with TikTok, you can expand super quickly, but it's like, if you haven't done your homework before that, then it can go awry pretty fast, right? Like if you're on that platform and you're like, I don't know if I'm like a new moon or a balsamic moon, like in my birth chart, like that's a problem, right? But
that's
like
a huge problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who will tell me things that reveal that they don't really know more than like 30% of what astrology is. But it's like, you know, they're out there making content, and a lot of this content is like oftentimes like meme astrology, right? Like that's how we classify that. It's like, you know, these 3 signs are entering their villain era. Like, what does that even mean? You know? And so I try to like really stay in my own lane. And I know that every astrologer on TikTok has their own like MO. And like, I respect that because we're all individuals, we're all unique. But for me, it's less about like getting more followers than every other astrologer. I just want like the highest quality audience. So I just like speak the truth. I speak the facts, and I like keep it like pretty educational. It's like you're trying to learn. I'm trying to like teach people something and be really serious about it actually. And because of that, like my fans are fucking awesome. Like, you know, when I go live, they ask me like really pointed questions that I would not expect. You know, they're asking about the part of fortune. They're asking about placements that like you wouldn't immediately jump to.
Right, and that kind of, I wanted to ask you because like there's a lot of topics in astrology, and of course horoscopes is probably one of the biggest ones because it's like helping people to understand. And I'm very much a horoscopic, you know, astrologer. I'm here to always give the horoscope.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to topics like when you brought up like fifth house placements, and it's true, whether it's Leo energy or it could be anything that's fifth house. And especially whatever rules that house and what planet, you know, you'll find interesting ways. Maybe, I don't know if it was like Saturn, maybe it would be like this controlled moment of like, I do it every time at this time of day. And that's the only time I do it. But it still is, there's something about it. But when you come up with your topics, there's so many. Is it mainly the audience that you're looking to? Or is it more of a channeled spiritual kind of thing for you where it's like, I feel this right now and I have to just get it out there? How much of that, because you are a Scorpio, so you are super psychic. How much of it is more psychic on the topic end, and how much more of it is sometimes where you're like, well, let me see what other people are doing? Is it kind of like, what's the ratio there?
Yeah. It's definitely not always a perfect science, but I will say, you know, with Scorpios, we like to hold on to like certain feelings that we get out of things. So sometimes it's like, I will actually I would in the past lean into a content type like too much, where it was like, I kept doing the same thing because I wanted that, because I knew that it had like at least some chance for virality. But eventually you're right. Like I just started getting psychic downloads. So like when I run, and especially like when the sun's like in my face, like there's something that happens. If I have the right playlist, you know, I'm just like in the zone. But, you know, it just comes to me. And I do look at transits, obviously, to figure out like what exactly is happening right now. But for the most part, I get my idea within, you know, an hour before I make the video. And then I write the script in like 30 seconds. I deliver it in one take max because I don't waste time. But I think that, you know, I'm leaning into my psychic capabilities more and more as I go through this process, because what happened for me was eventually I started getting a lot of psychics. And, you know, as I was reading these people who are psychic, they would tell me like, Evan, I think you are channeling. I think you're channeling when you're reading my chart. Like, I don't think you're just looking at the facts and the numbers and whatever. And at the time, like, I didn't really fully like understand what they were saying. But then like, as I've like started to accept that Scorpio side of me, it's like, no, I can trust my instincts. I can trust my psychic side when I'm making these videos. Like there is something that people need to know. But like when I design these forecasts now, I'm doing these like monthly horoscopes on TikTok, which like usually do like those are my biggest videos. In that case, I'm mostly just looking at the charts. But like a lot of people find it to be spot on. And I'm like, I mean, how do you make forecasts for that many people? You have to like have a methodology, like in my opinion, like you got to be following, well, I don't want to give away my methodology actually, but you know what I mean? Like every astrologer has a method where they figure out, okay, there is
Scorpio,
something here.
I love it.
Yeah, I mean, but I think I found a system that works. And, I was a data analyst at L2, this digital strategy startup. And at that startup, it's like I learned to think like I was in Microsoft Excel all day. Like I was just crunching numbers.
Which that's not a fucking easy program. Like people think that still to this day, I fucking hate Excel.
Yeah. It takes a lot of time to like, I mean, it's kind of rigid, right? Like you have to fit into their model, which is such a Virgoan thing. But when I was at this company, it was like I was doing a lot of data work all day, but eventually they were like, Evan, like we just want you to, like we also want you to present. Like, so I would give presentations to like 300 clients at a time, like fashion clients, beauty brands, luxury brands, CPG, all over New York. We would like book a theater like Joe's Pub or something, or the Andaz Hotel or something. And we would just I would give a presentation. But that's another thing that I figured out I could hook into with TikTok is like, I already was put under like some pretty high pressure, like professional presentations where you'd give like 100 slide presentation about like digital marketing, which isn't exactly always the most exciting thing. And I was like, dude, if I can do that, like I can get in front of the camera and make these videos. Like and a lot of people think it's super easy. They're like, well, I can do this too. But it's like, I think like a lot of people, and I think that's what makes me different, not to hype myself up too much here, but it's like, I come from like a very corporate background. Like I had a boss every day being like, you got to turn in this project. If it's not good, like you have to start over. You have to tweak this. Or if that like in our presentations, we were literally rated by the audience out of 5 stars. Like who is the best presenter at this thing? So super competitive. And so when I came into astrology with a business mindset, I started getting a lot of clients who are also businessy. Like they're like, I've never wanted a reading until I saw you. And I was like, this guy's really analytical. So I feel like, it's like underneath the hood, there's actually a lot going on, but it's like, and you get this too. It's like, we make it look easy, but it's like underneath that, there's a lot of years of like doing the same thing every day.
All the time, especially doing astrology videos or like you said, the business aspect, because to put it out there on your phone is one thing, but to actually understand the audience, understand how you're going to present yourself. And also it takes courage to be able to step up. And now you said you were always being reviewed. We're also being reviewed by people and whether or not you're getting traction or not. I know people have been doing it for 10 plus years and still have got the same amount of people that have, and they're good.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things to where it does take that little bit of extra, whether it's business or it's the passion to be the greatest at who you are and what you do. And I don't think that you should ever feel ashamed to feel that way, because I feel like that's what makes anybody great. Like I feel like that's the only way to be in any industry or in anything, and especially if it's astrology, which happens to be one of the oldest professions of all time, but yet one of the smallest now in numbers. It's one of those things where you have to give it that extra, and that's what you definitely do. And I feel that it's important because everybody is really tuning more into these places like astrology, and astrology being one of the more, I would say, stronger places of the what the heck's going on. I think what happened over the last now coming up 3 years has been making people, of course, they've been trying to watch all these alternative programs or health energy or so much of it's been caught up in the doctors and the health, and it's like, it's so funny because Hippocrates, who used astrology and made the Hippocratic Oath based off astrology, it's like I'm waiting for that moment for us as astrologers to come together. If you think of everybody that's been testifying in Congress or the Senate hearings or anywhere, it's like, when are they going to call us up? I feel that call's coming really soon. And maybe that's what Pluto and Aquarius is too. Is that there's this missing piece for the world out there. How you describe that missing piece from moving into the story that you wrote in 2012 to 2020, or even that story of your whole life that was just kind of like the numbers and how to look at data and how to look at the world. Probably, I don't know. Were you somebody who always looked at the world a little bit like there's something maybe else going on?
Yeah, I mean, I was at a wedding a few weeks ago for a high school classmate of mine, and one of my friends from high school is like, he was like, Evan, like, I feel like when we were like talking on the phone, like way back in like elementary school, like you always like wanted to find patterns. Like you were always asking these weird questions about like how far away is, like how many light years away is Pluto, or like what does it mean, like what is the universe all about? And I was like, honestly, like that's true, but I think that there is meaning in those patterns, right?
Yes.
Like we are shamed out of that process of like, and this is something, you know, that I've been thinking and stewing on for a long time, is like, why was, and you know, you probably know way more than me about the answer to this, but like, why was astrology completely taken out of the education system, even as a historical artifact? So like if we had a scientist in here right now to say like, to try to argue against astrology, it's like, even if that was their position, it's like, you still should be teaching it as like an artifact of like, these are the 12 signs. This is what the planets mean. And this is how it shows up in art and culture, the 7-day week, and all these things. And it's like, I had this thought where it was like, well, if we don't have the planets, we can't attribute things in our life to the planets, then we have to find a scapegoat. And when we find a scapegoat, we divide the house, and then there's powerful people at the top. So for me, like astrology is actually a way to unify people, not divide people. But the powerful people know that. So they're like, we're going to take that power away from you. We're going to take that knowledge away from you. And we're going to say like, all of these problems in the world are based on like this one person or this one group. And then this group wants this group to go away or whatever. And it's just like gets entangled. So for me, it's like astrology is a unifier. So it's like all of astrology, like astrologers like disagree over a lot of things nowadays. But I do think like the spirit is the same that we come from, which is like, we all have some degree of empathy, because like I see clients from every group and every perspective, and it's like they're all asking me the same questions. They're asking me very human questions, and just like music and math and astrology, like these are all universal languages in my opinion. So I think that like one of my goals, I have 3 life goals, main goals at this point, and one of them is to find a way to get astrology back in there. And like, you know, I know that's such a like it's such a pie in the sky thing, and there's a lot of hoops in there. I don't
think so.
But I feel like it's got to come back. Like even again as a like, why? Like I remember I took a Latin class for like a year in middle school, and that was the only time we even talked about like the Roman and the Greek gods and goddesses. Right. But even then, there was never a conversation around like, well, these are the zodiac signs. Yeah. And so it's like, it's a little strange to me. So like, no matter how far into the realm of like theorizing we are, of like, is this really like a psyop or something? It's like, that is a pretty like fucking weird thing, right? The fact that they don't even talk about it.
No, they don't. Because I mean, if you look back to get to the history, you have in the 800s where finally you start to see the Catholic Church get its true power. And if you think astrologically, it's not till that 1284 transit where the church and then the Dark Ages follow that, where they rewrite the Bible a lot. And so it's one of those things to be like, let's get rid of that Roman and that Greek energy, the pagans basically, and convert everybody to Christianity. And then when you see it in science is the battle of the Renaissance, where you have people having to go underground. You have, whether it was Galileo even, right? Like you have this church science. Yeah. And then you see with somebody like Sir Isaac Newton, who kind of uses it all, but has to go into the church and act like he's about the Trinity when he's not, and all these crazy things. And then kind of they honor him as this great scientist, where he's actually buried next to all the monarchs. And he's the definition now of like science. So there's like been this like science and religious split that both sides don't want the astrology. So it's more than just the religious institutions, but it's the scientific community, because they don't want people to know that they got their science from alchemy. They don't want people to know that. And then religion doesn't want people to know that they got their stories and they got their Easter and they got their Christmas and they got all these things from astrology. Like they, and and they're both power centers. And then now you're seeing it in the science community, but you're also seeing it in that health community. It's almost like, it's crazy, because in California, if you're a doctor now and you go against the narrative, you'll get your license taken away. So it's like, doctors are going through what astrologers went through. But I think that's what's going to be weird, is people are going to like almost like see astrologers kind of come back in many ways, to, especially with Pluto and Aquarius, to be like, hey, let's help kind of decipher the codes of what the fuck's going on here. And it's been a long time. It's almost like a long time coming back. You want to talk about Scorpio season, an old zombie coming back. It's almost like that they look at astrology as like a zombie in many ways.
And I think that, whether it's religion or science, as we understand it today, it is so much about hierarchies and power structures and reinforcing those, right? So like nobody, like people want like to own the truth. Like they want to be able to own the truth so that you can't have the truth, right? And it's like, I'm hoping that with Pluto and Aquarius, again, like the internet is the printing press of the modern day, where it's like all of a sudden we realize there are like how many life hacks are there at this point that like are actually useful? Like sometimes life hacks are like, you know, totally gimmicky and whatever, and it's just to get views. But like there's a lot of life hacks out there that are free and cheap, and like they're a way that can empower you. Like for me, one of the life hacks I figured out is like just doing breath work every morning. You know, I start off with like I do the Wim Hof thing for 10 minutes, and it's like I'm starting off from a way better state of balance than I ever did before that, and it's totally free. And it's like only because of the internet that I was able to figure that out, because I had a friend send me the link to that. He was like, you should try doing this. So it's like for me, it's all about simplicity, like living in your own authentic truth, and also, you know, getting yourself out of this matrix, you know, because when I meditate, I pretend like I'm in a forest like 20,000 years ago. Like I don't imagine any civilization or anything like that. And when I'm lying on the ground in the forest, like I can literally feel the vibration of the earth. Like I can feel the resonance of it, and it just lights me up. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm in harmony. I'm in harmony. I feel really good. So anyways, I think that there is a connection with the age of Pisces between the institutions of religion, the institutions of science, where it's like whatever truth they behold, and, you know, like with everything, there's truths and falsehoods wrapped in it. But the problem is that it's like the way that they leverage this power. And like going back to what I was saying about, you know, how every industry has a series of companies like basically owning it. You know, you think about like pharma, you know, that's only like a few companies dominating that space. Right. So, you know, it's like you have
mixed, coerced with the government and the government agencies too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like literally like a YouTube video, a 10-minute YouTube video that I use every morning, just like put me in a way better state of mind, body, and soul. But yeah, I mean, I also, you know, was thinking about these eclipses because I feel like this even could kind of like fit into this as like a reset for a lot of people. Like in terms of like, you know, the placements that are active on these eclipses, I think about Uranus opposing Mercury, Uranus opposing Venus on November 8th. Like, to me, that is opening a new door for a lot of people. It's a quantum leap, and it's basically like, hey, like, what do I actually want for myself? Like, what's actually uniquely me? And how can I kind of untether myself? You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, because I feel, and I would love to ask you this question leading into the eclipses, because I think they're connected. So Aquarius, of course, electronics, internet, all these things. But at the same time, whether it's age of Pisces moving to Aquarius, or whether we look at Jupiter and Neptune back in Pisces, which hasn't happened since 1856, they're both the rulers of Pisces. But if I think of the phone, I think of that as Aquarius, but what's coming out of the phone is Piscean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's crazy because that's where we're really at, especially with the most powerful transits of Jupiter, Saturn, which is every 20 years. And now they started a new cycle in air signs for the next couple hundred years. It happened at 0 Aquarius. And then here we go. We got Jupiter, Neptune that have met in Pisces. And that hasn't happened since 1856. And then we're getting Saturn and Neptune. Yeah. And we're getting Neptune also at these this last decan in the last degrees of being in Pisces, right before the last time was a civil war that was building up in America, and division in so many areas of life that I almost feel like, you know, we say that it's the phone, we say it's these things, but it's almost like people aren't really realizing how much is actually connected to where we do get our media. Back in 1856, it was pamphlets. It was the political cartoons were so extreme. I laugh when people are like, the political environment's so bad today. I'm just like, man, there was people that a person got beat down in the Senate back in the day.
Yeah, that's true.
And you know, it's one of those places where we're at with these eclipses. I'm hoping, as you say, because it's like it's opening the door to this Aquarian energy that Pluto is about to bring to us, but even more so with the Pluto and Saturn, or sorry, the Saturn and Uranus square we've been going through. The fact that this lunar eclipse is in the middle of that kind of finishing touch And it's also the finishing touch of, I would say, Pluto and Capricorn, because I feel like the Pluto, regressing back into Capricorn is so weak. There's not a lot going to be happening, that this is really kind of the big reveal, I guess. But I would just like to get your thoughts on, just with how much Piscean energy is out there mixed with this Aquarius, it does feel like a crazy, wild experiment, and a spiritual one at best. They might say that they don't accept astrology out there, but it's behind the Wizard of Oz that they're using all the occult knowledge in many ways.
Yeah. No, I think there's like two layers that you touched on that I want to expand on. So number one, I think you're spot on with like the Aquarius energy. Like, we have the interconnectedness, but it's like, what's the message that's being projected? Like, it is kind of like oftentimes toxic. But in astrology, I always think about this fate versus free will thing. And it's like, we don't get to pick the themes. Like, that's fated to me. Like, we know that the themes are coming. We know even in your birth chart, we know what you're going to encounter, which it would be like a Saturn-Venus square. This is your time to commit to ending or, continuing the relationship. But it's like, we have agency as individuals to work and navigate those themes, work through those themes how we want. And so when I think about all the Aquarius and Pisces energy that's being emitted right now, it's like, if you play a passive role, and I see this all the time in the spiritual community, where it's just like, like on TikTok, people will say like, I claim this energy and I claim this energy. And it's like, you don't get to like sit around and cherry pick stuff like that, And like, people who play a passive role like that, it's like, they don't actually, they're probably just waiting. They're waiting for something. And if you're just waiting for something, the messages can control you. Yeah. But it's like, if you are leaning into more of the Aquarian side, which is like, again, like this printing press, this new evolution in information, where it's like, no, I can actually hunt down this life hack, or I can hunt down this like this kernel of truth that this person has, then this is actually one of the best times where you can just pluck the information you need and create your own entrepreneurial whatever out of it, or your own knowledge base. So I think that's point number one. But point number two is that Pisces is about spirituality, and I think with that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in December 2020, I talked to a lot of people who started looking into astrology the same time as me. Yeah. A lot of people are like, I started, like, they're always like, I don't want to tell people about that because I don't think they'll believe that I'm actually an astrologer yet. I'm like, no, like, you can be an astrologer if you started then. Like, you can be a great astrologer if you started then. You can be a terrible astrologer if you started in 1990. Right. And right now, a lot of people are waking up because they had the time to reflect. And like, it's hard to be a Pisces. It's hard to channel Pisces energy in 2022 versus like 10,000 years ago when you had time. Now it's like everything is like, you got to get this done at 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock. But the entire whatever the hell is going on, like where we had 2 years basically to sit with ourselves, I think a lot of people like me were like, I need something more. I loved having the New York lifestyle. Like, I went to like every great restaurant there. I mean, not every, you can never see every restaurant in Manhattan, but like I went to like all the great restaurants. I had a very like nice lifestyle. But it was like I needed to go another level deeper, which is what Scorpio is about.
The subways weren't deep enough.
Yeah. Well, I always think about the old subways. I would never want to ride those. Right. That was like a pneumatic tube or some crazy shit. But yeah, I mean, so I think that it's like, and this is what I tell people all the time. Like, if you didn't like wake up to something more, purposeful in your life over the last 2 years, then like, I don't really know what to tell you, because that was your chance. Like that, and it's like, if you're watching this and you're like, well, yeah, but like I just started like getting deeper into tarot or something or other modalities and I want to kind of further that. It's like, yeah, you're on the right track. But it's like, if you literally spent the last 2 years being like, when can we go back to the old way? When can we like go back to normal? It's like, you're missing the point. You know what I mean? Like, you're missing the point. There's literally like the skies are opening up for people right now, which is like, hey, like the universe is saying like, listen to me a little bit more. And it's like, for me, it was pretty easy. I mean, again, it took kind of a concussion, so it was a little odd in that way. But it's like, I took that message because there was
rather grimmish.
Yeah. Yeah. People always ask me if I'm related. I mean, I might be actually. I'm still looking into it. But but it's like I had a chance to not get off my city bike in 2019. Like in 2019, I had a chance to not get off my city bike and keep going. But I was like, this tree is trying to tell me something, and it's like. It didn't like have intelligible language to it, but it's like there was something in there which ended up being a different a modified birth chart that I'm actually creating right now. So I saw like an alternative, which doesn't, I'm not making it to invalidate the current system, but it's like I see like other birth charts that you can create, you know, because there's, of course, there's all kinds of ones that make the same story, that tell the same story. But, you know, it's like that tree had something of a wisdom for me, which took me back to like Celtic stuff too, which is a whole different story. But, you know, it's basically like, are you going to get off the bike or are you not going to? I think a lot of people would not do that. A lot of people in my position would not have done that, because it's like you have no incentive, really. You have the job, you have the lifestyle and whatever. But I was like, you know, this time is a little different. And I was having my Saturn return around that time too. So I have Saturn cap.
Right.
At 21 degrees. So it's like my Saturn return was wrapped up in the whole entirety of that lockdown. So yeah, it was definitely a big wake up call.
And very faded too, I would say. But it reminds me of like when you're bringing up how this has been a huge moment for people the skies really have opened up for people. And it reminds me of like that as an astrologer, we're observers, right? But it's like also at the same time as we make the observations of the planets and a lot more, because astrology is so much more than just, it really is an observation of every part of life and the understanding of the universe as a whole, which is one of the best parts about it. Yeah. And the syncretism that comes with it and the galactic understanding and so forth. But it's almost like what's observing us, or what's the observation? Like, how is it that these planets are literally the only thing in life that is reliable? Like I always say that life is changeable. There's no constant, but the only constant there is astrology. That's the only thing we can guarantee and know, that we have a lunar eclipse on November 8th. Yeah. You know, conjunct Uranus and square. We know exactly. That's the only thing in life with a guarantee that it will be there, or even the seasons. But I feel like at this moment now, you know, everything that's so changeable out there without the correlation of the constant is not aligned. And it's like easy to help people now, I feel. And I think as what you're doing and a lot of us astrologers out there are doing is we're helping people go, maybe you might not want to pay attention to this because it fucking is not aligned with what the constant's here, and this is what's changing, and that's always going to change the world and the reality and all this crazy shit. But there's going to be moments where the constant hits that variable, and he's going to be like, that's aligned. That's actually this is going on, or no, this is completely off the Richter scale, and I'm sorry to tell you, it's fucking just like crazy. And that's what's actually the craziest part, I feel, is that we're at a time where we're basing life off the most things that are variable to the highest extreme and trying to catch the next variable, like as if we're just going like a frog on lily pad to lily pad that's sinking and sinking and sinking and sinking, when right next to those lily pads is this really solid, you know, mantle, the same, you know, thickness that creates Manhattan, New York to be able to build so tall. Like it's just right there. And I feel that, you know, that's I think like the core of where, you know, astrology is the best thing for, which unfortunately we actually got to this place, especially, I mean, it's been a long period of time of a slow growth, if you were to think of it like a chart, like, you know, in economics, right? It's just like been a slow growth, and then 2020 like just went fucking crazy off the charts.
I think there's another Renaissance era on the way spiritually. So it's like, again, if you're watching this and you're like, hey, I'm just starting to dabble in this, like it's not too late. Like to me, Pluto at 0 Aquarius is going to be like the ultimate like awakening in that sense, because like the Jupiter Saturn conjunction, I think, was there for those who were looking for it. But the Pluto in Aquarius placement is a lot more of like you're like literally like just dropping, it's more pervasive. It's like you're just dropping this wisdom into the well, into the water, and it's seeping into every facet of your life. It's getting into your, and it's hitting the collective. Because like Pluto is those unconscious urges. And it's like, what do we have? Like, what are we driven towards? What is our soul's mission all of a sudden, like in the Pluto and Aquarius era? I think it is like the mission is to liberate and awaken. And to, you know, this is another thing too, is I was co-hosting a live with JK Ultra, who's another really great TikToker. And she and I were kind of like projecting out into the future of like what's going to happen. And I was like, honestly, I feel like we're going to need psychics, like to be like working at these technology companies.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna need to understand that, like telepathy and like psychic capabilities that people have, like you can use that to take like, you know, the iPhone to the next level. Like you can use that to like go hands free, because I think that's where everybody in the tech industry wants to go. And I'm not saying that that's a good or bad thing, by the way, because that could be the dark side of Aquarius. But it's like if you want to get into a zone where, you know, we can all connect without having to type away, like you're going to need psychics, you're going to need spiritualists like that. So I think that like there will be more of an embrace.
Be the fall of them, because it could be the fact that people realize that they can connect without using these companies.
Exactly.
Right? Like
that's what I think is like, you know, the ancients. The ancients were a lot smarter than us. Like I really like when I meditate and I'm only just dropping myself in a different location, but it's like when I dissolve the boundaries between myself and nature, it's like all of a sudden I realize like I have a telepathic connection with the trees and the animals and like maybe even other people. And it's like the ancients like didn't have to leave these devices behind. Like there was clearly like a technology that they were using and hooking into that we no longer have access to really unless you look for it. Because as soon as you're, you know, like when kids are like, they talk about past lives or they say something that's kind of psychic, it's like, that's like frowned upon still. It's like still like, no, that's like, you know, that's not.
Fortune telling.
Yeah, it's like fortune telling. But that stuff is legit. You know, there's nothing, you know, odd about that. Like, I think that, you know, it's like we have these instincts, but you know, I think that, and again, I think that even on the eclipse, like, and I think that sometimes, right, like sometimes people will overhype, like, you know, an eclipse here and there, but I think that this eclipse is like pretty big for people because like, I don't see Uranus on the full moon that often. And especially after that Mars, you know, Uranus North Node conjunction, I kind of feel like that even now it's like this is a time for people to kind of get those epiphanies and all of a sudden realize like, okay, like I am more connected than I thought, or I can, you know, telepathically connect to something, you know, like it can get like, I think this eclipse could get like pretty weird in a good way for people.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I think, extremely intense, you know, because
this is me talking as a Scorpio, yeah.
Right, and me as a Leo, right? It's like, holy shit, it's dead conjunct Uranus. It's square Saturn in Aquarius as that's getting ready for its exit out. And it's Scorpio Sun with Mercury, the South Node, Venus. There's so much in this one. Yeah. And as Venus has disappeared and Mars has stationed retrograde in the middle of both eclipses. Yeah. In Gemini, which is squared to Neptune and Pisces, and Mars has not retrograded through Gemini in its entirety of the sign since 1943. You have Uranus in positions of where we were in 38 and 39 when you start seeing the buildup of World War II, and we're seeing that in the world. And then you're mixing up a Pluto return to America during this lunar eclipse, which is feeling like the revolution and this unfairness and more than just taxation without representation, but you know, this idea that we can, as individuals, govern ourselves and not have these higher class or monarchs, or in now today's term, these kind of like, you know, fascist corporate government, you know, entities ruling our lives, and mix in another World War II transit of Mars retrograde in Gemini, or Neptune and Pisces in the Civil War, and this kind of clash between them all happening at the same time. This is the eclipse that I would say is the unraveling of, when I was asking earlier about this, what's observing us, this also is kind of peeking its head into these places outside of, you know, the celestial that we're used to always looking at, or even galactically into this higher realm, the super celestial. Like this is like going beyond the celestial now, and where we're tapping in, but also kind of peeping a little doorway out into where we've never been able to see beyond. We might even have a discovery of a planet, like, you know, Planet X, you know,
I absolutely agree.
We're at that place where if you think of the world and where it's all at and what's happened, this is the eclipse where it's all bounding up like, okay, everybody's frustrated and everybody's ready to see something pop and change, you know?
I mean, I think there's like a silver lining for some people who are like already waking up and they're like just trying to like improve their lives. But I think like you're like, for the society at large, it's like the vast majority of people don't want change. They don't want freedom. They don't want any of these things. And so Uranus is just like a slap in the face of like, here you go, here's a wild card, you know. And I think that, you know, when we think about the midterms that are coming up, like conjuncting that, I do think with Uranus being like so highlighted in this chart, it's like a lot of people are going to want change. So it's like when they go to the ballot box, they're going to think like, who's different than what I'm used to? Who is going to like maybe be that maverick or that pioneer, or like talk about things in kind of like an unpredictable way? I think like a lot of people do want that. But then I also think about the Saturn's T-square in the middle, and it's like, okay, Saturn is also thinking like, okay, but do those candidates, or does that person have a long-term plan behind it? You know, and so what I see, like, you know, in terms of like the U.S., is I see a pretty chaotic mix of results, basically, because like people are just driven to want something different, and it's all going to crisscross. And, you know, with Saturn there, like a lot of people are going to realize like, I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of people just like vote and then realize like the next day, like, who did I just elect? You know, like, did I really just elect that person? Like, there's just a lot of confusion. And I think you're right about the Mars Neptune square and Jupiter involved in that. It's like people don't really know what to think right now. They don't really know, like, they're exhausted, you know. And I have Mars retrograde in Gemini in my birth chart, so I totally get this energy. But like for most people, it's kind of like it's like too much information. It's like TMI. Like, I don't need to know anything more. Like, I've heard enough about these candidates. I've heard enough from my friends. I'm getting too many text messages. Like, a lot of people are kind of exhausted right now and drained. And so what does that translate to for the election? I just think Uranus is right there saying, hey, you're tired? You just want something different? People are going to be like, sure. I'm just going to circle a box that I usually wouldn't circle. You know, and like so I think that that's like one facet of the eclipses. But you know, I also think about Uranus is still marching towards that Capricorn decan of Taurus. Like, it's not there yet. And you know, we talked about this at the retreat. You know, it's like one sort of hemicycle of Pluto from 0 Leo to 0 Aquarius is exactly interlinked with that Uranus at 20 Taurus. That's where it was in 1939. That's where it's going to be next year. And that's only a Uranus cycle, basically. So that's only 84 years for Pluto to get in that quicker phase of the cycle. But what exactly is, you know, a Uranus and a Capricorn decan in Taurus? Like, that is an unraveling. That is an unraveling of structure and value in Taurus. So it's like, you know, and this is funny too. Like, whenever people like knock astrology to me, I'm like, okay, but like, you're literally placing your faith in the dollar. Like, the dollar is an imaginary thing. Like, you don't really, like, doesn't have inherent value, like, per se. So it's like human beings are capable of all kinds of things like this. And it's like, is the faith suddenly shocked or shaken by in some way, whether it's like a specific currency or whatnot? Like, I just think that like next year, you're just going to see Uranus like pull out these very shocking truths where it's like, what can I put my faith into?
Well, I was going to say, you know, especially because we're in the North Node in Uranus energy, and I can bring us both in here. It's kind of interesting. March 31st of 2007, we had North Node Uranus, and they were both here at 16 Pisces. And, you know, that was right when the financial crisis was beginning. But it was also, you know, a time in where the world was getting ready to change, and that was Pluto at the end of Sag. Right?
Yeah.
Then it's like 1991 was the other North Node Uranus, and that one was in Capricorn with Neptune. And that was a huge monumental change in the 90s, and technology and the computer becoming a daily thing being used and starting to be integrated. And I remember, because I'm born in 84, I remember computers started showing up at my school, you know?
Yeah.
But then you go back into the 70s and inflation, Scorpio, North Node Uranus. And this kind of weird time of the 70s and kind of the hippie era kind of ending in a weird way. But also that was Pluto in Libra still. And so the Scorpio energy was kind of, we were foreseeing kind of what Scorpio were seeing. But I've never seen anything like what we're going through as I keep going back. 61, North Node Uranus, Leo, you know. This one definitely was a big one because it was kind of foreseeing the big major events that were coming of the Pluto-Uranus square. And at the same time, it was, you know, the building of suburban America and kind of that American dream. And, you know, when you go back, it's like now looking at where we're at with Jupiter and Neptune, 1856, but in 55, right before they met, was North Node Uranus in Taurus. And the North Node will be at 13 degrees, Uranus at 16. But the two correlations of Jupiter and Neptune, right? Jupiter was in Aquarius, came to Neptune. That would have been our 2021.
Yeah.
But it was North Node Uranus. And that was the craziest switch of presidents, of the political parties, of, you know, the craziness of what, you know, it's so funny how our media doesn't talk about that time.
Yeah.
Yet it's replaying the most of anything right now.
Yeah.
And where we're at right now. And then 1779, which was when we're, you know, in the middle of a revolutionary war, was a North Node Uranus in Gemini. And that's kind of an interesting period, because that became where we started to see a turn of events to where the Continental Army started to win when they were getting their asses handed to them. So North Node Uranus is a long shot and also a turning of, you know, time. And then 1687, I found this one, which was really interesting, because it was North Node Uranus in Taurus again at 18 degrees. And we saw that this year with Mars. And that was 1687. And that was a wild time as well. At the same time, you know, the end of the Renaissance and, you know, really coming into this new scientific revolution, but also at the same time, there were so many things happening, because this was also Neptune and Pisces. And there's something about North Node Uranus and Taurus with Neptune and Pisces.
Yeah.
And so, you know, history and astrology, they like to play themselves out. But I just feel like, you know, it's kind of interesting to see that this is quite a moment where there's a lot of unpredictability. But no matter what it is, it's going to turn the world on its head. It's going to bitch slap you, as you say. And I say that too. I always say it's like TikTok, for example, right? It's a bitch slap for me that I don't do enough TikToks. Or when I've read in the chat, some people are like, yeah, I don't know if I do TikTok. And other people are like, I love TikTok, right? It's like, no matter what with Uranus energy, you always have to advance forward. You can't just stay in the same place, and you have to, it might be a little frustrating at first, but it's always the breakthrough, and you're always like, why did I do this shit sooner? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think fixed signs, right? Like, we're all kind of going through this, I don't know if it's an identity crisis per se, but it's definitely like close to that, because, you know, it's like we have Uranus and Saturn like pulling us in different directions. And so, like, you know, when I got into astrology, I had a Uranus moon opposition. So like, that's when I moved to LA. I liberated myself and I got into that. But then all of a sudden I had Saturn squaring my moon. Saturn now still squaring my sun, eventually squaring my Venus. And it's like, I'm being tested, you know? I'm being tested to basically solidify something with Saturn, to manifest something, but to do it way differently in an alternative way and take the alternative path. But I know a lot of other fixed signs. I honestly, especially Tauruses, I'm not gonna lie. A lot of Tauruses are like really like refusing to like shake, like to lean into this Uranus energy. And it's like, they want to stay this course and be really patient, because like a lot of Tauruses I know, I mean, honestly, like the patience is sometimes like a good thing. But in this case, it's like, okay, but you're not actually like acknowledging that you need this change,
right?
You know? And so like fixed signs, I think, you know, in a lot, it's dynamic tension. So like fixed signs right now can be changing the world. Fixed signs right now can be like really popping and making an impact on social media with Uranus. But the fixed signs that have decided to stay where they are, I've noticed a lot of them are just like, they're struggling and they don't have to, you know, like that's a huge dimension to this. So I think these eclipses,
especially Aquarians too, with Saturn and being in their sign.
True. Like I think these eclipses are a wake-up call for fixed signs, like who haven't like really come online yet, you know, because like, again, like, and but it's not an easy answer. Because like, again, sometimes I lean into the Uranus energy where I'm like, I just want to like rewrite the whole fucking script and like just do this other thing and like just go off the grid entirely. You know, just like go get a house in Vermont and like you have to find me to get a reading. You have to like use like fucking, you know, like MapQuest to find me. You know,
print it out.
Yeah, and print it out. Exactly. And you know, with Saturn though, it's like, hey, like I need you to like have a roof over your head. I need you to build a business. I need you to like really like make a name for yourself, because Saturn, you know, is about like, to me, it's a lot about legacy. Like, what do I want to leave behind? And you know, for me, like that's really like the tension point there. Is like Uranus and Saturn, and when I mix those planets together, to me, that's sustainable progress. Like that's the composite of these planets. So it's like we are pushing things forward. We're changing up our game, but like it's something that like I could actually do like next year and like 5 years and 10 years from now. So I think that's what like fixed signs need to be thinking about right now is like, how can I make that change? But like, you know, and I also think about Scorpio and Taurus risings, you know, like I feel like especially Scorpio risings, a lot of Scorpio risings I know, like they're not even like really sure if they're interested in their relationship anymore because they've got Uranus in the 7th house, like on this eclipse, like that. I hear that and I'm like, you should probably just end the relationship. You know what I mean? So I think that a lot of fixed signs, like we want to hold on.
It'll never hit them again like this ever in their life.
Yeah.
It's almost like their only moment they're ever going to have of being honest with themselves.
Yeah.
And also to be honest about the values of a relationship. Although some Scorpio risings too could have been dickheads and never been paying attention to the relationship and then throw it away and then realize the whole time they had the most valuable thing and you never did evolve and see that. It depends.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But I think you're right. And I think when you bring up fixed signs 100%, but then for just anybody who might not be a fixed sign, I mean, it's a wake up no matter what. And especially when you brought up how that you like that Saturn-Uranus combination, especially together. But with them being in square, it reminds me of the experiments we've seen around the world that have been just thrown out with emergency use and all this kind of stuff. And it's created a havoc and it's created people to actually become neurotic in many ways or even psychotic about it and feeling that that's the way to be saved is from something that has no data. We don't even have the data.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, there's something about Saturn saying, take your time. And that's what Saturn, especially in Aquarius, has been saying the whole time squaring Uranus. Like, take your time. Make sure that you're not blowing the world up or that Frankenstein fucking crazy new thing Boston University did of mixing the original of this bullshit to the fucking Omicron. It's like, that's fucking terrifying. That's real Halloween shit on this Halloween. But then today I read that in fucking the UK, another lab did the same thing. And they went into hamsters with it. So it's like, who's popping up all this like, we need to fucking try crazy shit. This is definitely not about doing crazy shit. People, I think, misconceive Uranus as be crazy and rebellious. Well, not when it's not good for humanity, not when it's not good for others. Like that's like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think about like Pluto, once it's in Aquarius, it's going to be at that exact point where Jupiter and Saturn conjuncted at the end of 2020. And like Pluto is revelations. So it's like we will get a lot more revelations around the scientific process behind a lot of things, you know, like it's like, you know, I think that that's a big piece of it. But I also think like, you know, 2026, that's when the elements change. You know, the distribution is like now going towards fire and air.
Right.
You know, we get, like you said, the Neptune-Saturn conjunction in Aries. We get Uranus and Gemini eventually. And Pluto and Aquarius, like right now, like actually today, there's no fire in the sky apart from Chiron. And like, it's very hard for people to feel motivated. You know, it's like, we're all kind of passive right now. Like, I think a lot of people are vessels, you know, to be honest. And so it's like, we're taking in these messages every day and we're kind of like, okay, we have no defense mechanisms anymore. So it's like goes right into our subconscious and people are just taking it as is. But I think in 2026, like there's a little bit more of like a motivation and like people are going to be like kind of energized a little bit to like, you know, focus on like, what do I need? Aries is the self. So like, what do I need? What's even maybe like a new conception of the world, a new structure that we want. And like Saturn Neptune can dissolve things. You know, we think about the last Saturn Neptune conjunction in like 89, like there was obviously the dissolution of, you know, the communist Russia and everything. So, you know, there could be another one of those, but then even after that, we still have the next Saturn Uranus conjunction, you know, in Gemini in 2032. And so I think we're almost like kind of deconstructing things because we're in the last quarter phase of that cycle, which is like basically like, like they're trying a bunch of shit right now, but it's like eventually we have to like get rid of that narrative and build something new in Gemini, and which like I don't even know.
Anyway, it's not got a lot of strength. It's like I feel like people are so like afraid. It's Halloween, ironically. We're in Scorpio. I'm with the Scorpio. And that Saturn Uranus 3/4 square is a waning square. It's weakening. And I feel like people are so afraid of massive takeover when it's you're going to be the one that accepts the massive takeover. You know, and it's like, you know, and especially by allowing, I think the big lesson of Saturn Uranus square was you really are going to let other people that they're not people in many ways. They're people on screens, and they're people on phones, and they're people that seem of this high authority when they're really not. Fucking dictate what you're going to do and define your unique existence. And I think that's the big burst happening in this eclipse cycle and coming up, as you mentioned, those transits that are coming up, and even the muddying we've been through of all this earth and water that's been along of it. And then, of course, we kind of like to have that when we're in the opposite, right? When we go to fire and air, it's got, God, can we get some foundational stuff here? But right now we're like, God, there's too much of this foundation here. There's too much of this fucking every day. There's plastic in front of me, and fucking these people are fucking wearing a mask everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like too much. Like it's like funny to see that though. That everybody in every situation right now, it doesn't matter what political aisle you're on or how you see the world, we're all looking for where the fuck is this all converging to? And it feels like that's what Uranus does, is it converges, but with Saturn squaring this one, it's a lot bigger. And I like how you bring up the end of the 80s into the beginning of the 90s when they connected in Capricorn. Because it's crazy, because that's when we really saw Microsoft, Apple, and really even if I think of Terminator 2 in 91 when that came out, and right after that, and the idea of like the chips and fucking Skynet and all this crazy shit, this is the 3/4 square of that position right now.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I think that regardless of the element we're talking about, like something I keep going back to, that I tell people is like, we live in an over Saturnized society. Like, I don't know if that's a real fucking word, but I think that that's like the best way to describe it. So it's like everything in your life is structured. Like I always tell people, like write out the amount of rules that you have to abide by every day. Like just write them out. Like everything from like drive on the side of the road to like, show up to work at this time. Like we have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rules that we have to like live by every day. And it's like you grow up in a household where it's like you have to answer to parents. Then as soon as you go through that, you go to college, you have to answer to a professor. Then you go get a job, you have to answer to a manager. And by the way, even if you're like hooked into like religion, you have to answer to one God. So it's like we live, and when you have to answer to science, you have to answer to like one or two people now. So it's like, we live in this day and age where it's like everything needs to be this pyramid structure. Everything needs to be a hierarchy. And it's just like so obvious that like that's what's happening. And so it's like, my question is like, how can we like disassemble that? And it's like, we need structure, we need foundation, but I'm always thinking about like, am I like there's times when I just project this assumption of authority onto other people where it's like, I just assume that you know what you're doing. I just assume that you can tell me what to do. I just assume that like, I'm supposed to like get into some type of line or programming. And as I get into astrology and I unhook myself from that, I'm realizing, wow, like I can just, go and reach out for that star. I can just do this thing. And it's like very empowering. But then I look around and I'm like, most people are just like, they don't like, I think you mentioned this at the retreat, like most people don't want freedom, but it's like, how do we get to a stage where people want that, know?
I mean, it reminds me of Ye, otherwise known as Kanye, has come out with some stuff lately. And it reminds me of how he got in a lot of trouble for saying, that, his ancestors in slavery, they chose it. They could have gotten out of it. And it really upset people. But I think it was more of him just making people think of, I don't think he meant it as maybe as literal as more as like, what if you were in that situation? Would you accept it? Or would you have fought to get out of that? And I know that's controversial, but it does come to that question. Do people really want freedom? Like, they told people in America, we were lucky. They said, lockdown. There was zero enforcement. None. There was no enforcement. So it was your choice to be a slave to that in many ways, right?
Yeah, that's why I keep thinking about that analogy of the red light. You show people a red light, there's no cross traffic, you just going to stay there? Most people are just going to stay there. Like we live in the society at this point where no matter what the circumstances are, true or false or legitimate or illegitimate, people will look at the red light and they'll be like, somebody decided that light should be red, so I better not fucking move. And I think that, that's a powerful system. That's a powerful system. And it's like everything's very intricately placed where it's like once you have the narrative you want, There's a set number of networks and stations that will propagate that. And so, that's the dark side of Aquarius, right? Like anyone can get the information within seconds. You can tweet it out. You can put it on the news station. And all of a sudden there's these cascading impacts, and there's all these people hooked into the same back channel where it's like, this is what we're going to say. And pretty quickly you will accept that is the truth. And it's like people jump to conclusions like way too quickly nowadays because of that. Like people don't have time to react. And the problem is, if you're hooking in to people's fears and they don't have time to react with this type of like information system, it's like things can get like pretty unwieldy. Where it's like all of a sudden, like, I don't know. It's like, again, like I see the lights red. I haven't seen a car go the other way in like 2 hours. Should I drive? But no one else is doing it. So it's like, it is a really, like when I talk to people about these things, it's like, they have this like glazed look on their face where it's like, they're just not able to even like entertain these topics. They don't even know that like, maybe I could drive across. Maybe I could actually do that. So again, I think that's the Saturn Pluto cycle. It's not the easiest. We're stuck with this for 34 years. And I think that, it's a pretty steely energy. Saturn is lead, you can't break through Saturn that easily. So I think that, and
there's a lot of secrets about it all with Pluto that was behind it, and Saturn occulting Pluto, right? Mm-hmm. That Michael Luton always used to tell me, and every time the moon was in Capricorn, it was passing Saturn Pluto in 2018 and 2019. Secret meetings were being held at that time for the planning and the plotting. And he even was saying, I interviewed him in 2018 at UAC, and the United Astrology Conference, and there it was, him talking about there's secret meetings going on right now. Mm-hmm. About what's about to come. And I think a lot of it's going to be revealed, but I don't think people are going to, it's like there's already been so much that's been revealed, and I can't believe how many people are dismissing it as if it's false when it's actual, literally coming from the sources that are the same sources that they're expecting it to come from. It's almost like, nah.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing with aliens, right? Like, people like aren't even equipped to like entertain that, and it's like, because again, like that's not what like my parents told me. That's not what my teachers told me. That's not what my professors and my managers told me. And it's like, okay, like fair enough. Like we maybe don't talk about it a lot if we haven't like seen one directly in our like own perception, but it's like, again, like our world we have such a limited perspective of our place in the universe. And it's like whenever I make astrology videos on TikTok, I always get skeptics. Like there's always like a few skeptics who catch on to these videos, and I love that. I love provoking skeptics. Like I'm here, I'm like, I have the tools in the toolbox to defend against whatever they're saying, honestly, at this point. But like a lot of them will say like, oh, sure, like, like a rock in the sky is going to like, tell me my personality. And it's like, they just like aren't what that statement says to me is just like, I am ignorant, basically. Right. Like even if you like have an issue with astrology, even if you have an issue with that, what you're really saying when you say like a rock has nothing to do with my personality is I have not ever done the investigative work to like even like think about that as a potential. And moreover, I have such a geocentric worldview, which is so ironic, right? Because scientists are always saying that like, well, astrology is like disproven because of the geocentric thing. Yeah. But it's like, these skeptics are geocentric in the sense that they think that the Earth is all there is. So that's the ultimate irony. So it's like you have to like think about, okay. And I think for a lot of people it's hard because a lot of people are scared. They don't want to think that like there are other things out there because they don't want to have their worldview deconstructed. And this happens whenever I tell people I'm an astrologer. So like, this is my other favorite activity, which is a very Scorpio thing. But I love like going into situations where like nobody's expecting me to say I'm an astrologer. So like I'll dress up like this and I'll get, like I went to an alumni event and I went to Northwestern, which is like a top school, and it's like everyone who goes there does the same 3 jobs. They're a doctor, a lawyer, consultant, finance person, whatever. And I went to an alumni event here in LA, and it's like nobody came in like assuming anything, but like still never would they expect astrologer. So everyone was like, oh, I'm a hedge fund manager, I'm a film producer, what do you do? And I was like, I'm an astrologer. And they were just like so weirded out by that. Yeah. They were like, how did you infiltrate our system? How did you get into our society? How did you get into our circle? And so it's like, why does that happen? Again, it's because people are, and this is something I figured out in the higher education system, is like when you go to these top schools, like a lot of people are just funneled into the same fraternities and sororities, which then are recruited by the same companies.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the people, again, this is why it starts with the education. Maybe this is my Mercury and Sag talking, but I think it all starts with the educational process. So like when I went to that school, it was like, I asked people, where are you from? And everyone was from the same like 10 suburbs, honestly. And like I didn't know what Bloomfield Hills, Michigan was until I went to Northwestern. But anyway, so once I kind of like was there, I realized like there was something missing. You know, like I did a philosophy major because I just like wanted something like kind of abstract to hook into. But like I was thinking like, why is everyone flipping from like freshman year, they're saying like, I have these dreams. And then by senior year, they're just like, I want to go work for like Goldman or something. It's like, why does
that's a weird
like,
transition.
why does that happen? Like, why are we drained of our inspiration? It's because these are systems, like these are systems of power and control. And they are, look, and then I'm not knocking like necessarily like the process of like going to college. Like I think that like I learned a lot, and like that's the reason that I'm successful is because like that school gave me an amazing process and I was surrounded by smart people. So like I'm not like kind of making it like a personal attack, but I will say there's room for growth there because you have like a lot of like, you have a tenured professorship and you have like the same subjects that you can like talk about. And I think that that's what Gen Z is doing a great job of. Is Gen Z is challenging that system. They have Uranus and Aquarius, Pluto and Sag. So they're like, can I learn something? Can I take that knowledge a layer deeper? You know, we still have computer science. That's still important. We still have multivariable calculus. Right. Like I loved those classes, but it's like, can I just like dig into something a little bit more purpose driven, you know? So anyways, that's all my way to say, like, I think that, like most people are just like not even in the frame of mind to understand astrology. So like, it's kind of a moot point when I talk to skeptics. Because they're just like, yeah, but like that's not what I was taught. That's what they're telling you. They're not telling you anything about astrology.
Or I hate to say it, but whether it's, you know, people that they look up to, like, of course, there's like Richard Dawkins and there's like Neil Tyson
deGrasse. Right, like, how many names?
Like these are the people that they also go to for it. Or you're right, they come from what they were taught. But to me, it's like, what is life, right? So they like a microorganism on some planet in another system, and they go, we found life on another planet. But to me, it's like there's life force. There's a life that's a conscious life that actually has an ability to communicate with the universe at large. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the missing point, right? Like, I mean, I could say that there's life in, you know, this jewel pod still that's pretty much empty, and I just replaced it. But, you know, Scorpio reminds us that everything dies too. And like that there's an emotional attachment to that death, right? Like if this world were the dinosaurs and the extinction event, right? That's an event where you could tap in and who knows if that was even truth, right? That's like the kind of the question, right? Like, or did they all just like grow wings and fly away? We don't know fully. I mean, there are a lot of them. There's a lot of proof, but it's one of those things to where it's like there's a connection to life because there's like, I can't believe all those dinosaurs died. Or if that were to happen to us, right? That's the number one fear is always like right now, nuclear annihilation or whether or not a virus will get out and kill everybody. Yeah. There's some emotional thing to it. That's life to me where it's like, do we give a fuck if the microorganism on fucking some random planet in the middle of fucking some other galaxy died? No, we don't.
Yeah.
So,
I think,
you know what I mean? So I feel like there's that's the part of the problem is that the idea of life now has been given into these very, I hate to say sad and very boring and very like lost interpretations of what life is and scientific, right? Like, oh yeah, it's because there's these molecules and these biological aspects and these scientific discoveries of this particle or this situation. It's just like even CERN, the idea of we're going to try and find God by smashing particles together and accelerating them. There's another story behind that. Yeah. You're not just trying to find God. That's a really nice way to make people feel that, you know, when 2020 happened, there was a lot of data leaks that were online. I'm an old school, you know, I've been on the internet since it first came out. And there was a lot of stuff from the WHO in like 2009 and 10 documents saying, how are we going to get people to take a bunch of shots when they take, at that time, this new technology hadn't been out. So they were like, when they moved to synthetic, they already had the ideas of using this synthetic mRNA technology. And in those documents, it was like, but the religions and people are going to be, and people who aren't religious are not going to really want to take it. And they didn't, it was an open-ended question in the documents, right? And I remember going, fuck, they already back then were knowing that people are going to be fucking weirded out about things that are, but what my point is the same skeptics are the ones that are so about these crazy radical technologies and experimentations on their actual living being that harm it possibly in way more risk than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That's where it's the funniest to me, because I'm always like, you're right, it's ignorance. It's like, it's wanting to believe the authority and not wanting to be an observer, but to give credence to what they don't realize they think is authority is actually observing them as an experiment in many ways. That's kind of the weird part, is the grand experiment has been going on. And people have been the experiment. There's no more lab rats anymore. The people have always been the experiment in many ways. I think that's one of the crazy revolutions that are in revelations at the same time that is happening, is people are realizing, I don't want to fucking be the experiment anymore. I don't want to be the data. I love Edward Snowden because I think he was a patriot. I think what he did took more courage than most people in this world will ever have to be in the NSA and to see what they were doing, and that they were collecting, and they still are, all of our metadata, every keystroke, every fucking thing we've ever done, every cookie of every website has been just collected for one day. Who knows what, the quantum supercomputer that can compute that now in 2 seconds? It's like, that's the kind of shit that is mind-boggling to me, that this is all converging. And convergence to me is Uranus, where it all roads lead to this one kind of radical moment of an explosion that we don't know where the fuck it's going to go, where. And it reminds me of how it's very Iranian to smash particles together and expect to find God in the middle of that. Like that's like, it's all happening too this year. Let's turn it up and put more power to that motherfucker. I feel like we're at that kind of energy, and it's weird that Mars is retrograde in Gemini for this one, because it's really gonna reshape the identification of people's thoughts. But at the same time, this media giant of Jupiter retrograde, Neptune retrograde in Pisces, as this is happening in this eclipse, the media giant is going to throw everything it has, and it's the rulers of Pisces, so it's definitely more stronger than Mars retrograde in a Gemini. And it's just going to fucking, I don't want people's minds to change, and I'm going to keep trying to change people's minds away. An illusion is. And so this is where the great illusion is converging on top of all of that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's crazy, man.
No, I love everything you just said, and I think it dovetails exactly with what I was thinking, which is the modern framework, or whatever you want to call it, is really, what's the point of it? It makes people loathe the human condition, right? So if you have all these things happening where it's like, you can be fixed, or you have something wrong with you, we're going to help you, we're going to solve your problems. Like, that is coming from a place of lack. That's coming from a place of like, I kind of hate the human condition. I want something different. And so it's like, what are these people feasting on? They're feasting on more answers. And it's just like that, what's that, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy story, where it's like, the answer to life is, what do you think, it's 42? It's like, that's what they're at. Like, it's like, that's the ultimate joke. It's like, they literally think that you can come up with a number of like, this is the answer to life. Like you're saying, like microbes on another planet. Like it's kind of interesting, but it's like, you're right. Like, how much can be gained by looking inward? Like, we're constantly looking outward. And I think that that's another Scorpio concept is, I think you gain knowledge when you quiet the mind, first of all. So like, that's like something I've been living by this year. So like, again, I've learned a lot more about humanity, and ancient societies by meditating. So again, like when you dissolve the self and you start to go inward, you realize like there's a lot of knowledge that you can access in your like instinctual, like animalistic brain and your spiritual side, your crown chakra or whatever. So it's like I'm out here like thriving off of my own like sort of knowledge that I'm able to access.
Your
and
own
it's like
code,
your own code.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like all these people are just, you know, there was, I can't read auras like anymore, but there was a time when I was writing that book in 2012 where I had this awakening for like a few weeks when I wrote the whole thing. And I could see people's auras at the office I was at. And I was just like in this meeting and I was looking around, all these people just looked so like fucking depressed. Like they just looked so sad. They had no energy going on. Like their whole, like their auras were so like chaotic and cluttered and it was like dark. And I was like, I was like, I don't want that. You know, like I honestly, like I don't want to be like
a Scorpio that doesn't want that dark energy.
Yeah.
And that's a true statement though.
No. And it's like, I was in a very like, quote unquote successful internship and like, you know, all these people were successful, but I was like, I just don't want to be a middle manager at that age, at like whatever age they were at that time. Like I just like realized already, I was just like, they look really sad. And I was like, you know, I was like, you know, I knew there was some other realm of knowledge that wasn't being given to me. And again, like not a knock on like my alma mater per se. I think this is more of a common in higher education, but it's like for how much they charge you to go to college, like they do not give you the sort of like the fullness of experience where it's like, yeah, you can play sports, you can get math and science and liberal arts education, but it's like outside of like the traditional like religious studies like branch, like you can't really go to college and gain this like very like inner knowledge, right? Of your inner self and the spiritual dimensions to things. So it's like, we're clearly like missing something in the assembly line. Right. Yeah. Like, it's not like, again, like, and I don't want to like vilify people who are skeptical of astrology because I think like I was there once, like before I opened my first fucking book, I thought astrology was like, I just didn't know anything about it. So I thought it was like, I saw all the stereotypical things. I thought it was just 12 signs and 12 personalities. So before that, I was in the same boat. So I get it. But it's like, how can we design our society such that people have access to that information? Where it's like, again, you go inward to gain more knowledge. And it's like all these people who think about like therapy is the only answer to happiness for you or whatever. It's like, that's even more thinking and thought processes. And it's like, how can I analyze this? How can I analyze my pain? How can I analyze my emotions? And it's like, that's not always the answer. Like, I'm not saying it's not sometimes, but it's like, sometimes there is something to be said for just like releasing your attachments to things and just like letting the universe flow. Right. And when I heard people say that, I thought it was cliche, and I thought like they were just like, you know, they had something wrong with them, honestly. But then I tried it myself, and I was like, oh my God, they're right. And then I think back to culture, and I'm like, oh my God, like in culture, they always have a stereotypical spiritual person in a movie or a show, and that's another way to kind of vilify what we do. Right. You know, and it's like some of that stuff is kind of funny in a way, you know, like when you have like that, but like in like a comedy, but it's like it's still kind of reinforcing some stereotypes. And it's like astrology and spirituality like doesn't have to be where like everything is a divine message. It's not like all of us are sitting here like I'm not looking around like waiting for a 222 to pop up, you know, like, you know, I think you can actually be actually in greater control of your life and have greater responsibility and ownership by practicing astrology and spirituality.
Yeah. And I think that when you bring up coming back to the inner self, that's as astrologers, we look outside and then we bring it in to then bring it back out. And it's one of those things to where it's a beautiful exchange. I mean, if you use kind of the technological aspect of the download and the upload, like they don't teach you in school how to really upload to this reality unless it's through a router of a career or even in entrepreneurship, still like being part of that system and not doing anything really that unique. Yeah. Because the true entrepreneur definition is going to go into the market and disrupt it in a way that nobody has any handbooks to learn from and disrupt it and do something nobody's ever done before. Yeah. And that's not taught anymore. Like it's like everybody's like, no, you're going to do this. And then, look at you, you'll find a great job. Yeah. You'll find the right person. So it's like not teaching the skills of like finding that code that you describe that's inside of yourself. And when you do disconnect and when you do let the flow of the universe come, and more importantly, I think astrology is one of those beautiful things because it's got an out but an in. I don't even characterize one's more or the other. It's it's a process of both.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful exchange. And it's one of those things to where that's that exchange from the universe and our higher self to back to us here. Is astrology is that process it's a meditation within itself when you're doing it. Because when I especially in past life regression work, the only way to clear the mind is you have to go into that meditative state. And it's funny, you say you go to trees that are like 20,000 years old, right? Like I go to this desert place where I'm looking at this beautiful water and lake, and of course there's no civilization, there's no people around, and it's so peaceful, and I can feel the earth. But next thing I know, I'm out. I'm in the fucking hypnosis, and there I am, and I've gone through 20 plus hours in the chair over the last decade, and it's one of those things to where naturally in myself, when it's getting intuition or where it's feeling my life out or anything, it's like when I go back to that space, the clarity is there. It's like the idea that the clarity comes from the mind is not. I think of Gemini and I think of Virgo with Mercury. It's like, Mercury, Gemini is like how we process what it is kind of in the moment that we're doing and figuring it out. I feel opposed to this kind of like long, it's Sag that's the study process, Jupiter where it's a long study. Yeah. It's a long study and it's also experience too. Whereas Virgo is like, I think the house foundation's looking a little fucked up. Let's get the fucking surveyor out here. Let's get the fucking measuring tape and let's start and always needing to adjust something in the moment. But they're momentary planets. They're not long thought out things. You don't sit on a thought for a long time or you're fucked. Yeah. And I feel like that's also what they're trying to do at the same time. You brought up earlier and how they're making people not have a lot of time and then dip in the fear to where it actually puts them in a stalled place and with a thought process it's like, think about this horrible thought for a long time. And then that's how it embeds into people. Yeah. And especially with Mercury being at its, fall position in Pisces, right? It's one of those things where I feel like, the mind is not supposed to be overly thought. It's supposed to let go. That the fall of Mercury is when it finally lets go, it turns into the ether. It turns into the beautifulness of the spiritual or the imagination, that you can't think imagination up. You don't go sit down and go, I'm thinking about what I'm going to be imaginative today. You know what I mean? And that's what's also being forgot is the imagination just happens and it flows and it happens in the moment. You don't go, I'm going to go sit down and be imaginative, like I'm going to Disneyland and I'm going to be imaginative. And I feel like that's this beautiful part to where we're at a time where people are, I think the good news is that people are over all these places that they've been, whether we could say they were lied to or maybe Pink Floyd, The Wall was right the whole time. But I feel like, we're at a time where it's like, do you really want to live this existence anymore where it's not your existence? It's our unique code, but it's also all of our brothers and sisters on this planet that can be done way better. And we have to move forward no matter what. And I know, politically, whether it's from the right, there's that whole like, I want to keep it the old way it was, or the left, I want to go into these crazy different directions. Both are wrong in many ways because we have to move forward, but not crazy. And we can't just go back to 1776 fully. No. Yeah. So it's a place to where we can find an amazing way that's better than both ways to go and implement things that is good for all people. One that, again, it does come back to the right view of things of like, hey, we should have these very basic common laws that never get infringed upon. And we can progress in a way that, who gives a fuck what people certainly do in their lives? But when you start forcing people to do it, or you're putting it in front of fucking people that don't even have, like if a kid in California can't tan in a tanning bed till they're 18, because that's dangerous, but they can fucking cut their junk off by their own decision at fucking 7. There's a problem. Yeah.
I mean, I was going to talk about the social contract. Because I feel like that's something that kind of like is sitting right at the crux of all of this. Like think about like, why did you agree to be in a society? It's because societies say, we're going to give you safety in exchange for some of your freedom. Like there's a certain shit that we can't do, but at least we'll protect you. We'll put up the walls, whatever. And like we agreed to that thousands of years ago. But I think it's just like the equilibrium's a little off at this point, right? Because it's like we're at this point where it's like we've given up almost everything, right?
Yeah.
And how do you do that? You create this constant stream of danger and fear and the perception of like a threat. And if you're looking for outside authorities to tell you what's really happening, you're going to believe what they're saying, and they're going to tell you. And like when I stopped watching cable news, by the way, like a long time ago. And when I see it at like a hotel, I literally get like a pit in my stomach. Like I feel drained when I watch cable news, because it's like this thing's going to happen to you. This thing's going to happen to you. And all of a sudden I feel like, oh my God, suddenly I want to surrender my rights. Like I almost feel like giving away something to somebody. Here you go. Like here's another right, another freedom, because like clearly the world is so dangerous. Like I have to be safe, and it's like, but why is that? Again, like that was a fabricated, scenario. So like I wonder about that too. It's like, how is the social contract going to hold up? Because that's what's under a lot of pressure right now, too.
I mean, and when you brought that up, it reminded me of Benjamin Franklin. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
Yeah.
That's something that, was always, especially when you think of America, which I think it's kind of hilarious, is the most rebellious place to ever be on the planet, and say we're fucking governing ourselves, motherfucker. and the fucking sensitivity of the country now to be so unrebellious and to be so afraid of freedom and so afraid of rebellion, and to also try and diminish it as if it's like a bad thing.
Yeah.
Is where I think Uranus is going to smack the shit out of this place with a Pluto return at the same time. That's going to remind people that, do you want to remember the fate of what this was? Do you want it taken away from you because you don't want to keep that authority within its own, credence and creation? Yeah. I mean, that's the scary part to me, is like what you say is, I can't believe how. I mean, even being an astrologer, we're rebels in a world right now, and we have been for a long time, and through the ages. The one job that has stayed through the ages, besides prostitute, is astrologer.
Yeah. Which is a scorpionic. Yeah, I guess they're both scorpionic in their own way.
Yeah, they are.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, I was seen as like an evil person, like running outside in LA, going for a jog in 2020 and 2021. And I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I'm breathing. I'm getting healthier when I run. I'm breathing in the air. And in a town like that, it's like there's like this consternation. There's this evil eye, and it's the Saturnian judgment. That's Saturn right there. And I think a lot of people have over-identified with Saturn, where it's like they revere these certain authority figures that are giving them a structure because they have none of their own. And then they're applying that to everybody else. So it's like, I can judge you. I have a right to judge you because someone told me that that this is the truth. And so I think I think there's like this like science and religion have decided to kind of like meet up and pair up in a really like fucking creepy way, where I'm like, we're kind of like, this is like, to me, this is like late stage age of Pisces. Yeah. It's just like the last dying gasp of again, these structures where it's like, again, somebody apparently owns the truth, and it's like that's all handed down. But there was never a point where I altered my day-to-day process. Like I still went outside, I went hiking, and it's like, again, the answers are right here. And it's like I see so many people so depressed and so desperate to find this answer, and they're like, where am I? Like, where are you looking? Why do you have that 1,000-mile stare? Like, where's the answer? And they're always like, I don't know, I'm working on it. I'm getting a PhD in finding the fucking answer to the universe. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're literally just getting in line. You're getting into the assembly line. You're getting into their structure. You're getting a PhD. You're getting approval from somebody who claims to be the authority, and you're just projecting your whatever parental dynamics. I just think that like a lot of astrologers disagree over like Saturn, right? Like, is it like how should we read into like
trying to
It's
like they're trying to make trans astrology now too.
Well, I think that Saturn really is like, I think that Saturn is like way overplayed in our society right now. So it's like, I think too many people in astrology, and I get like, sometimes I actually get stitches from like other astrologers who are like, try to like throw their own take on top of what I'm saying. And I'm like get out of here. Like, but it's like, sometimes people will say like, well, Saturn is alchemy and Saturn is manifestation and all these great things. But it's like, you have to put the planets and the signs and everything in the context of where we are now. And again, like we live in this over Saturnized world. It's like everything is like structured. Everything has a rule. Everything, like honestly, people at this point, I think, at least in the US, could probably be sued for anything. Yeah. That's a Saturn concept too, I think. It's like anyone could be punished at any time. And maybe this is like my paranoid Scorpio brain operating too, but it's like, it's like I always feel that it's like, why do we have this many rules? But it's like we need more Uranus. So like I welcome Uranus in a lot of ways. Like there is definitely a dark side too, like you said, of experimentation, but Uranus is literally what catapulted me onto the stage as an astrologer. It's like I needed that Uranus moon opposition. I needed that Pluto opposition recently. Now my Sun and Venus eventually, which I don't even know what that's going to be. The Venus Uranus opposition. I don't know where I'm going to be at that point. That's a bit odd in terms of relationships. But
yeah, I just went to the square of Uranus to my Sun and to Venus over the last 4 years. So
yeah. But
I've been there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go.
I'm here. We're good.
Yeah. Well, I have a progressed Venus. My progressed chart is Venus, Mercury, Uranus, Neptune, Moon, Saturn, all in Cap.
Wow.
It's pretty fucking weird.
It's pretty stacked.
Yeah, it's pretty stacked, and a Sag Sun like randomly on the galactic center. But yeah, I just had a new moon in December, so that was like that was like the beginning. I felt like that was like the beginning of the story, like Harry Potter's like under the stairway kind of thing.
Which is perfectly aligned for you at this time too, with what you've already done. And I feel like the balsamic progression of a new moon is the building up for the new story. Like it's already exiting the story and entering into the new one. And then when the new one hits, it's a slow, but then every month that goes by, it gets more intense and it just starts growing and getting bigger and bigger. Yeah. But I feel like when you talk about this Uranian, I welcome it too, and how Saturnian people are. I mean, when Saturn goes through Capricorn Aquarius, it's the ruler of those two homes for 5 fucking years plus. Yeah. So, there's been a lot. And then you have Pluto that's in the middle of switching into both at the same time, and it's more extreme, and we're at the bottom of the lead fucking world. Like, and how you said on the assembly line, there's something missing, especially like this spiritual. We could just lump it as spiritual because that mixes astrology and everything. And I feel like that's what the Uranian element is. When you brought up science and the religious aspect, right? Like there's religion and science now. And so there's this whole science, religion, but then even religion itself is going into, when you bring up the depression that you see in people, I see it from the science religion, right? It's like, oh my God, Fauci said this, and they're saying, and then religion, it's like, don't worry, God, Jesus has figured it out, and as their friend is dying, or their friend is walking on, or themselves are walking on the street, and they don't have any answers, and they can't find where to go next, and it's the same fucking thing on both sides, again, the two sides that keep fucking saying the most evilish thing is the astrologers and the spiritual ones. I see the spiritual people through the last 3 years as doing the best through this whole thing and the most positive and willing to bring positive energy into all this. And that's been the comedy, the divine comedy through the whole thing is really, where is Paradiso is in the heavens and in the divine work. Yeah. And that purgatory is kind of a weird thing, because I would call it kind of the science and religious kind of weird things, because you saw both sides kind of fall for the trap in their own weird ways. And it always leads you, it doesn't lead you to paradise. That's the whole thing. The irony of Dante's work was, once you get out of purgatory, you still have to understand the spheres now to get to paradise, which is the spheres of the planets. Like,
well, I think we live in, I think, Robert Phoenix does a great job of explaining this as like an inverted reality. Like, I just love that framework, because astrology's actually given me a better template for taking personal responsibility than anything else in my life so far. Like, it's like, everyone who's hooked into like, they're like living for like what like a scientist is saying or what their like pastor is saying. It's like, it's almost like, to me, they're like, they want to outsource the responsibility and the decision process to somebody else. Like, that's really what's happening. And with astrology, it's like, again, nobody should be like cherry picking energies and saying, I claim this energy, or I just want that Venus Jupiter trine. I don't want that Saturn, Venus conjunction. And it's like with astrology is karma. So it's like when I look at my own chart, I understand like, what do I have to work on this time around? What are the things I already have in the toolkit as like natural talents? And it's like, that's my goal. Like when I see clients, it's like empowering them and not disempowering them. It's like, it's not just about fate. You don't get to pick the themes, but you get to pick the actions that you actually take and how you respond to those themes. And so it's like, I'm like living in this freedom that Uranus has given me with all these oppositions. And I'm seeing all these people who think that they have access to the knowledge. It's like, that is the apple. They've bitten the apple. And it's like, that's a false knowledge. That's not actually the way to live your best life. Like, It is a knowledge. Like, someone can tell me like, this is the derivative of x squared. And like, they're right, whatever. But it's like, and that has a place and time. But it's like, that's not going to give you the purpose for your life. So I don't know. I think that
it ends at the not only the apple turning and falling on the ground, but also kind of getting snatched into a place they might not want to go.
Yeah.
And that's like, because it reminds me of whether it's Adam and Eve or actually even like the evil queen in Snow White, right? It's like there's some sort of weird thing behind all this that's kind of that's the creepy part of it all, which we don't know about. And I feel like right now, I think so important, because helping people get a clear understanding, like you're right, like there's fate, but it's the timing of the events are coming and how you're going to handle it. And using your chart and using your soul code and knowing how to handle the actions is what the astrology helps you to do.
Yeah.
Because I feel like every transit of Saturn doesn't have to be horrible, and every single thing is not the same played out for everybody. It really is also the unique aspects of the flavor of your own planet. So if Pluto's conjuncting your Jupiter, right? Well, where's Pluto in your chart? To get the flavor of Pluto. You know what I mean? Yeah. Or if it's Jupiter to your Pluto, where's Jupiter in your chart, and what's kind of the flavor of that in many ways? It's all different for everybody. But I feel that we're at a point to where, and I'll say this from my own personal place, I lean on the right, and I'm all about freedom. And I definitely, my family fought in the fucking Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. And, I'm a son of American freedom, and that's like super important to me. But the rights with religious. So it's like, whether I've gone to Project Veritas events or I've done all this stuff, there's still the crazy look, even when I'm on the same team, like, I fucking voted for Trump. I'm totally about the fucking Bill of Rights. I know all about the history. I'm all about but you're an astrologer.
Yeah.
But then if I were to think of somebody on the left as an astrologer, right? They go to all this stuff and fucking Pfizer, baby, I got the tattoo and all this shit. And then you know what they do? Oh, you're into astrology? That pseudoscience shit?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That's so funny.
Right? That the astrologer at this point in time, it's fucking, what a fucking paradigm shift to be one. Again, but that's what astrologers always have to deal with. And I think that this is where we have way more in common, and to find a way to really come together. And you're right, it's been marginalized as the crazy weirdo in movies or films, or even when I was doing it back in the late 2000s and going, there was no memes. There was no memes. There was only a meme. To be honest, there was a meme. Astro.com used to do cartoon.
Oh, really?
Little ads of meme astrology, but it was like they would set up just like a little cartoon thing, and each character was a zodiac sign, and they would like change it up every month.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing I ever saw astrologically about a meme.
Yeah.
And there was a couple funny ones, and it was a Leo and a Sag, and they were like with a Virgo at a house, and the Leo and Sag went into the bedroom and started fucking because they were bored. You know, they were like, hey, fuck. And this Virgo was like, what's going on? You know? But it was like, you know, it was like that. This is a different world to where there is the goodness of what you do, and the others that are on TikTok or even YouTube or anywhere, where it doesn't matter really, I think, the level in the general understanding of where we're at right now, because it's helping people get to it. Some people got to be the doorways to the most basic parts to help maybe somebody along a longer journey. Yeah. But I think where you and I relate, Robert Phoenix, and especially the event we just did, is that there's something massive happening right now. Yeah. And this is where astrology really comes into play when you take it to that higher level, into that soaked in knowledge level of it, and where you've used it in application with clients, and you've used it in application with, you're doing weekly forecasts and you're doing monthly forecasts, and you're doing it with somebody, and you're doing it within yourself too. And when you're also looking at it about the world, and they call it mundane astrology, which fucking makes no sense to me, because mundane means boring. Yeah. It's like even the terminology, but I feel that we are at a great turning point to where people, the school I'm doing right now is turning an astrologer to prophet, that building a prophecy with your work. You'll never be able to call yourself a prophet, because you're not a prophet until you're dead, and it's your prophecies that live on. But I feel that, you know, people have to not be afraid to step into this powerful knowledge within themselves and bring it into the world. That's the only way it's going to change. And I think with Pluto being the energy that activates, the planet that activates, especially whenever I see Pluto transit somebody's chart in a conjunction with their planet, oh my God, it's like, that's the activator. No other planet comes around and activates like Pluto. It fucking turns it on. It fucking turns it on. I don't care if it's retrograde either. It fucking turns it on. When it's fucking conjuncted by Neptune or when it conjuncted by Jupiter, I was like, holy fuck, you know what I mean? That shit turned my shit on. You know, like Pluto in Aquarius is going to force people to activate the collective by their individual code and express it, and stop fucking being afraid to rebel against a system that's actually one that has to be rebelled against, because it's fucking taking away everything from humanity and making everybody depressed and lost and fucking and fucking kneeling to Saturn. It really is, it's true.
People are looking for these connections, they're desperate for them. They want the connections in like anything, the dating apps, and some of that stuff's legit, but it's like astrology for me, honestly, is like the best way for me to like embrace my wholeness and my uniqueness, you know? And like, that's not something that you can access through a lot of other, like outside of like divination, like other spiritual practices, like I think you just need that deeper layer to like really respect and cherish yourself, like in your fullness. So it's like, I accept the fact that I have Saturn in the 7th house. So relationships are not that fucking easy for me, you know, but it's like, at least I have a grid where I can see that. Like, oh, Evan, like that's something you should work on. You know, not everybody's a cop or a judge. You got to get over that. Like every time I see Saturn in the 7th, I say that to somebody, but then I see my 5th house stellium and I'm like, yeah, but you have a lot of power in front of a camera or on a stage as a musician or whatever. And so it's like, astrology has given me this, like, it's opened my eyes. And it's like, again, I'm looking around at all these people who are like they basically hate themselves. And it's because someone has told them that they are weak, that they don't have all the answers, that they need to literally look outside of themselves for everything. Right. It's like it's like basically people are saying that you are poor within. That's what the people are saying nowadays. And they've been saying that for how many hundreds of years probably. And then even like one more layer on top of that I was going to add is like Freud's nephew started the whole like PR industry, like the whole advertising industry, like that documentary Century of the Self, just like totally opened my eyes to the fact that like there are some like, and that was the Neptune Pluto cycle in 1890. And so like, you know, this whole system, we're still living in that cycle obviously. And it's like, this is about, again, like taking everything away from you internally and then giving it to you through like movies and advertising and film. And like, obviously I love movies and TV shows, but it's like, I'm always conscious of like, what is going on here? Like, what is the programming? And again, the programming is like, you are not complete, or you have something that we can give you that you need more of, which I think is a scorpionic thought too, which is like, we're trying to pull that back in to our energy field through the culture and through these like addictive things where it's like, we want that because we can't surface that in our own life naturally because of the social contract. So I think we live in like a pretty bizarre world, but I feel like again, astrology and other spiritual practices, like to me, like really are the keys.
Yeah, and I think that Pluto Neptune that you're talking about, and the Plutonian part of it, if I think of Pluto and Scorpio, is when the peak of that came, like fucking magazine at every fucking corner.
Yeah.
There was Watchman by Sony. I had one as a kid that was black and white TV. It wasn't mine, but I remember my grandma being like, this is the last Jimmy Carson show. And we were in Yosemite during the fires, and I'm like with the antenna trying to find the TV.
Oh, wow, yeah.
But it's like Pluto and Scorpio kind of brought us there, but it's the sensation of pushing the buy on the button is the Pluto energy. It's the Amazon. I want it prime. I want it now and fast, and it's the idealization of I gotta have it, and the drawing in of it, and even the waiting for it. Yeah. The tracking number. Like there's that whole,
that's interesting.
The whole pull of like, it's the same thing on a date, right? It's like gonna go on a date with this person, and then on the date it's not very Plutonian, but it's when you start taking off the clothes and it gets back to that what's underneath that, you know what I mean? And what's inside of that, like Pluto keeps taking you deeper and deeper and deeper, and Scorpio takes you so deep. And I feel like with this Taurus energy, it's North Node here in Uranus, it's helping us disconnect from where we've gone too deep and too far with the South Node Scorpio.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because I mean, it's funny when you brought up as a Scorpio that when you were hanging out and you went back to a lot of your alumni and stuff, and or when you just see certain people, it's just kind of like like fuck, like I just want to be where there's some positive energy around.
Yeah.
And you would think a Scorpio would be like, oh, let's feed off the negative energy. They're quite the opposite. Scorpio is not wanting to be around negative energy. That's like the last thing that they want. Yeah, not at all. And I know that as a Leo because I'll be like fucking, all Scorpios I know are like down to have a good time just as much as me. Yeah. And I'm like, fuck yeah. And I never see a Scorpio whenever I like know my Scorpio buddies and shit or girls that I know. The second it gets negative for some situation in their life, they're like, fuck this shit, it's fucking weird. I don't know, it's fucking weird. And, because Pluto at the end of the day wants the good shit too. Yeah. Taurus is an amazing axis of, it's the best shit there is, period, emotionally, physically, and how that combines. And so it's like, this is a time where people have to realize that, and I hate to say it, depression is a horrible thing, and that's the plague. Yeah. And it's from what you said, this taking away from the inside. You have to get it from outside of yourself. And that's the only way. And then, no, that's not the only way, because when you get it, then that's what causes the depression, because it doesn't leave you with anything. It leaves you empty. And that emptiness then becomes so deep. And in these times, what a great way to do it too. Take away life from you. Take away, your ability to have purpose with work and to see your family or to do all these things. And then, but you can have some money and you can now buy a little bit, you can buy that better TV to sit at home now more. And the unwrapping of it, the putting it up is exciting. Maybe the 2 to 3 days of watching it's exciting, and then it's dead. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's dead.
Exactly. People, people need like constant stimulation, right? Like that's like a huge part of that. But I think like, in terms of like, how do you bring that energy back into yourself? How do you how do you take the power back? Like when I see clients, it's like, I feel like I'm almost like in some ways like reparenting, right? It's almost like, it's like you're basically showing them, these are the tools you have. This is step one. But a lot of people are coming with like very deep questions of like, what am I supposed to do with my life? I don't feel like my career is fulfilling enough, or I don't feel like this relationship is fulfilling enough. And it's like the beauty of the birth chart is like, it can actually show you the roadmap to like, how do you get that energy back? And it's like, but theoretically, if you didn't have that issue of like the authorities like taking that away, it's like you would literally just like, that's your true soul. Like that's your true self. Right. And you're letting it shine through all of a sudden again. And, in my opinion, it's like people should be activating their entire charts, like all at once. Like my career now, like as an astrologer, it's like, it's making use of my 5th house, Scorpio stellium. It's making use of my Mars, Mercury opposition, my Jupiter Leo in the 2nd house. Zero Aquarius, North, like everything in my chart is being used with astrology now. My 12th house Mars, I never knew how to use it. My 12th house Mars was basically going to happy hours 4 nights a week in New York. Like that was my 12th house Mars. It just wanted to escape. Or maybe playing music too, but like it didn't have always like a clear direction to it. And so then when I realized I can replace that with something more purposeful, all of a sudden the 12th house was like a place of activation and energy, which it wasn't before. Before that, it was a drain.
And that's even with this Jupiter-Neptune energy right now in Pisces. It's like the activation is like the places you say, as a 12th house Sun and Venus myself, oh boy, especially being a DJ and a raver, cuddle puddled with a bunch of fucking naked people, fucking chicks with a bunch of ecstasy was my fucking like salvation at a time in my life, and listening to fucking the DJs. But it didn't go anywhere at some point, right?
Yeah.
And so it was when spirituality came, it was like, God, I didn't need anything. You don't need anything outside yourself. And there's a purpose, and there's a calling, whether you want to call that God's calling. It's like there's a calling to do something that's so much beyond our scope and understanding, but you don't need to understand it in the mental way. It's a feeling that you go with, and it's beautiful. And I feel like with this Jupiter-Neptune, the greatest dreams and imaginations of our life is this transit.
Yeah.
And it only will come through activating and getting out of your patterns, your places where you're addicted to being in your cycles that just keep reoccurring, where you self-doubt and self-undo yourself and keep bashing yourself and being being afraid. It's the limitations that are invisible that you can't see. It's the limitations that are subconscious. And that's why when you talked about psychology earlier, it was Carl Jung that was like, no, let's look a little bit deeper into this. And he used astrology, for God's sakes.
I know.
And he looked at the shadows and he understood the shadow so well. And the shadow of Pisces is the illusions of limitation in ourselves to not show up fully to ourselves. Really, that's what it is. It's I don't want my soul to be a soul. I want to be something other than my soul. I want to be this thing that outside or whatever it could be. And that's why it's jails, it's hospitals, it's fucking nut houses. It's where you can get really lost off a place that's not your true self. You're not your true soul. And right now, the idea that people think that, oh no, people are their true selves and they're doing, the shit out there is crazy right now. It's crazy. But it shouldn't make you go crazy. It should activate you to be the opposite and to hold the space in this beautiful world, and that your visions and your dreams in this moment, for everybody out there, this is the one moment we'll ever have Jupiter, Neptune in their home sign. And we're lucky that the retrograde happened to come back just for the last 2 degrees to be like, hey, you want it? Are you sure this is it? Like, don't fuck around, because this eclipse and all this energy with here is the greatest dreams that could ever possibly happen, or the greatest self-undoing because of, there's a lot of triggers to that 12th house or Pisces energy. But I think you're right. You have to activate the whole chart, and that's the understanding of the completeness of who you are. And what's great is we keep adding on. I always say that the feminine astrologers out there know so much about the asteroids, and they really attach to those. And it's funny how the masculine kind of are more on the traditional astrology, but there's that beautiful connection that's happening. Because there's so many other fragmentations. Well, I wouldn't even call it fragments. I would call it more of an elaborate part of our souls that are the sprinkles and even more toppings of our greatness that we're finding in astrology every day. The best part of astrology is it's never just been stagnant. It never has. And it never ends, and it never gets to where you understand the whole thing. It's impossible. That's how deep and how vast and how interconnected it is. So I'd like to close this with asking, because you are Scorpio, it's Scorpio's season. And with Pluto transferring into a place we've never seen it, Pluto was founded in 1930, so we've never experienced, and even our founding fathers didn't experience a conscious awareness that Pluto was involved in this crazy transformational moment from Capricorn to Aquarius. What maybe tips do you have as a Scorpio with transformation, as the world is going to be a place we're not even going to recognize over these next coming years? But as a Scorpio, I mean, you all have your fucking crazy transformations that nobody knows about. But what are just some tips that maybe you might have to others to how to deal with these times and change, especially?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great closing question. I think that fundamentally everyone's trying to get back to source. That's like what I keep going back to with like Neptune and Pisces, Jupiter and Pisces. Everybody wants to get back to the state of unity, right? And ideally, though, we're upcycling into something more conscious, elevating our frequencies. And I think that's the new earth we're trying to create. But a lot of people, I think, like what Scorpio teaches me is that it's okay to let go. It's okay to release things because like I went through cycles in my life where it's like, you know, I was holding on to patterns for way too long. You know, like there was a stretch of my life where I was like kind of dating different people and they had different names, but they were kind of the same person, you know? And eventually I realized, like, once I realized that, I was able to like let that go and make space for people who are more like authentic for me. But like where I'm kind of going with that is, you know, so many people have been, again, disconnected from their human condition. People have been trained to basically loathe themselves. And so I think a lot of people are afraid to take the leap into something that they really want because they haven't been given permission to do that. Or they don't know like where the next step is going to take them. They don't know what it's going to be like to chase their passion. But what I've learned is that like it's going somewhere beautiful. When you decide like I do want to go back to the state of unity, I do want to accept myself fully, because Scorpio is all of yourself. It's like all the parts that you don't want to see as well. It's like every like piece of your mind that you think might be shameful, but it's like when you let it out into the light, it's actually not as bad as you think.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what the Scorpio process really wants for people, is to like let the shit out into the light and then accept it for what it is. Because fear is an acknowledgement, right? Like fear is an acknowledgement that there is something you're trying to find. There is something you're trying to conquer. And once you conquer that, I do think that you shed the baggage that you realize was just holding you back this whole time. Right. And then that's when you upcycle, and that's when you get closer to the source, which you realize is where I've been trying to go this whole time. But it's just that there are powers that be that have been trying to tell me to like trying to construct that reality and that process for me. So that's my advice, is to kind of like wake up to the fact that like, what is like truly my decision, what is not, but also like, what are my fears? And if you really want to get into your fears, like I always tell clients this, like just go through your day-to-day routine.
Right.
If there's anything you do that you would classify as like compulsive or deviant, just ask yourself, why do I do that? Why do I check the door 3 times at night? I don't know. Someone will say, oh, because I want to feel safe. Why don't you feel safe? That's the $1 million question that every Scorpio answers they're on their own. But if you're not a Scorpio, then like you might like need to go through a process there. But like that's kind of the dialogue of Scorpio. Like, why do I need to feel safe? Why do I need to do this thing? Why do I need to be with that person who reminds me of my toxic ex? Why do I need that? Scorpios can ask those tough questions. So like definitely ask yourself the tough questions, but know that it's like helping you. It's like helping to take you to a higher place.
Well, that's hugely good points, especially because it's attachment to things that we can't be afraid to look at, where it's so funny. Aquarius is the detachment realm and also an extreme connection realm. But that's what the fixed signs are.
Yeah.
Because that's what a Scorpio is, that's what Leo is, and that's what Taurus is. And so I feel like it's going to be revolutionary having Pluto back in a fixed sign. But especially, this is going to be a time where I think you're right. Like when you ask yourself questions of your shadow stuff and you're not afraid to look at it, you get an answer that you realize that you don't need some outside thing, right? Like it's always like, oh, I'm going to have to go get this. And maybe there's some things in life. I mean, if your fucking roof fell off, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, yeah, you're going to do that, you know? Why am I always wet at night? And I kind of like it. It's like, oh, fuck, you know? It's like maybe, you know, I used to like going to the water park and I don't do that anymore, but I definitely need a roof and I definitely could go to the water park or something. I don't know, but it's definitely, I think, going to be a time where people, you know, whenever Pluto's in the shadows, especially in Capricorn, it's been where we've all had a control thing, you know? It's like, oh, I want to go when it's the right time. You know, it's like, I remember living in LA and Hollywood. It's so funny when Saturn was squaring my sun, how you're going through that now. I was living in Hollywood and I remember, you know, it was like, God, I got invited to the Oscars And that's very hard to get into. And I remember being like, I had horoscopes and I was going to Sedona to look for this retreat I was doing on that Monday the next day, and the Oscars were always on a Sunday, and I'm like, fuck, it's just not the right time. But I remember being like, I'm fucking gonna go.
Yeah.
And there was that control part of me that was really, at that time, especially, it was the Pluto-Uranus square that was happening from Aries and Uranus and Pluto and Capricorn. And I think if people have realized the biggest attachment here of the shadow and the great fear is losing control. Like it's like lose control.
Yeah.
Lose the control, because trying to control a person or a narrative or it's always when you're too obsessed about losing something that it just keeps getting more down that road. It's when you let go, like with money, right? If you're so obsessed with having money, it's when you don't get the money. It's when you've let go, and it'll happen, and it happens better.
Yeah. Ask a field goal kicker that too, right? Like I think about that. Like that's the skill of like someone who's coming in at the 11th hour to save a game. Those guys probably don't even think about it.
Laces out, bro.
Laces out. As a Vikings fan, I have really struggled with that one. Yeah, we really don't get that.
And I used
program.
to be a Chargers fan. We used to have the best kicker too, but he couldn't win the whole games for us.
Yeah.
But I was referring also to in fucking what's that movie? Fucking with Laces Out, fucking with Jim Carrey, fucking Ace Ventura.
Oh,
and
yeah,
how that
yeah,
kicker, right?
Yeah,
misses the kick. And fucking goes crazy.
Yeah.
And then the room. That's not letting go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
That's super Plutonian, right?
Yeah,
And like how Dan Marino and everybody, right? And I'm gonna change it to a man or woman. And fucking like all that crazy shit that happens.
Yeah.
That's some crazy Pluto shit. And I feel like that's when you don't let go. And especially in Capricorn, holy cow. Like we can't control the outcome of everything in our life. It's not all going to be a win, but it always is a win. Because some things in life are meant to be and some things aren't meant to be. So it's like the things that are meant to be, you have to let go, because that leads to things that are meant to be. And that's the hard part, is if when you try to control the narrative that everything has to be a winning situation, which I think that's the problem in the spiritual community. It's kind of like the judgment of, oh, you're doing it wrong. But that's also like a control narrative of how people should be spiritually. And I said on my stage over there on December 31st, 2019, I said that my fear of this Pluto-Saturn, which I'm so glad that you refer to it as a 34-year period, because it really is, it is this. You're not spiritual enough because you don't say the right thing, or you're not drinking enough kombucha, or you're not right, like you're not doing enough meditation, or you're not wearing the right clothes to do this, and you're dishonoring fucking Metatron because of whatever. That creates the idea of a pope, or it creates a control personality situation. And I think we've been seeing some of those pop up in whether it's spiritual communities that have been kind of hijacked, because I feel like the dark side of Aquarius or Uranus is where it like gathers a bunch of people together, like how Black Lives Matter got hijacked. Everybody knows Kid Rock was just on with Bill Maher, and he says, and Bill Maher told Kid Rock, like, I love what you said about Black Lives Matter, how you're like, of course it fucking matters. It always fucking mattered. Like it wasn't like, who needs to go back to kindergarten? That's what he said. And I thought it was so good, but it got hijacked. But it used to be for some other form. And you can look at where, this is where you don't want to get hijacked. And especially that hijacking comes from the Pluto Capricorn of wanting to stay in a control place, which opposite is Cancer of safety. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like crazy how. I think this all comes back to like people have everything they need inside themselves, and it's just like every time people like accept the other narrative, it's like they're gonna keep looking for shit. Like there is something wrong with me, and it's like it's just fucking crazy. But and that's where Pluto and Capricorn's been cancel culture. Which that's something, again, like trying to control somebody from not saying something. It's all about punishment, because that empowers people, right? Right, and then it gives them a place to where they go find another place to go say it, and those people are going to still find them and follow. You're not, if anything, you're putting more attention to what they're saying. Yeah, it's like temporary. I feel like a lot of the Pluto Capricorn stuff, because Pluto is where we have our greatest power, and then I always say where we could be the fucking most stupidest person on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like the control system has been so stupid because it's temporary band-aids or fixes. Like, the plan's not working. Do this quick, fucking instant, powerful. I need it now fixed. All right, good. We'll move on to the next thing on the task list. And then it's like, sir, a lot of people now are fucking going to, oh God, now shut that for, it's just like, it reminds me of the monarch. And the last thing I want to say about this was I couldn't believe when the Queen died how fucking embraced America was, obsessed with the monarch we left. Like, it was crazy that's what plays. Our founding fathers would be fucking zombies right now on this Halloween. Fucking, I could see fucking all of them coming out. What the fuck are you guys doing?
Thought I saw one earlier.
But also the world, right? Like, Australia had a bunch of movements of people saying, it's okay, great, she's gone. This is the moment where they're in the transition. We say we don't want to be part of a monarch anymore. Yeah. And they got shut down. Like, oh, that's not respectable. What? Respectable? Fucking, those people don't even get in trouble. They cannot be prosecuted for any crime. The only people in the world that cannot be prosecuted for any crime is a fucking monarch.
Yeah. Yeah.
In their own monarchy, in their own country. That means they could do anything they literally want. And to give these people power is the ceremonies that they need those people. They need the subjects. We're not called subjects in America. We're called citizens. They're subjects to the king or the queen. And I feel like America and its transition of Pluto Capricorn was, this is not religious or God-based or king or monarch-based. It's people-based. And the separation of church and state, but also the separation of monarch and state. It was both.
Yeah.
And people in America get that fucked up with religion, and they get that fucked up with the idea of like still wanting some higher power, giving the executive branch so much power that these are going to be crazy adjustments, and it's all going to come down to our own energy within ourselves and realizing these control systems in ourselves that we have to let go of.
Absolutely.
Because the freedom is going to be, for some, I think it's going to be the most exhilarating thing. And for others, I think it's going to be the most terrifying thing. Because it's like they want to hold on to control and have an understanding of the plan and the idea that the world will stay the same and look the same, and we'll always be sitting here and looking at a TV and sitting down and opening Christmas gifts. And that's not what we were doing 300 years ago. It's not what we were doing to it. It changes. And that's the beautiful part of Scorpio is it's not just change. It's fucking, it's over and there's something new. And that's the best part. To me, change is very Gemini. It's like, I changed my mind, or I changed my shorts because I fucking pissed in them. It's a quick shift, but this is it's a forever shift.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Scorpio is forever. And that's why Scorpio's romanticism is, it's etched. They'll get the tattoo. They'll they'll do the thing that's it's forever.
We're around forever.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be around forever. I know that. Everybody in the chat's lit up about you, bro. And I already know that millions out there are lit up about you all over the place. And I appreciate you coming on. It was great to, I just want to give some shout out to Robert Phoenix for having us both out in Texas.
Absolutely,
that was such a great event, and all the people there. It was so great to be with those 100+ people, and we just had a great time. And it was great to get to know you and to be able to do this.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to be on the show.
More stuff with you, man.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. We should make this a collab. It's been electric for sure.
For sure, and I hope it's been electric for everyone. And make sure that you look on the links down below to find all about Evan Nathaniel Grimm. You can find him on TikTok, of course, but he's also got his YouTube. So make sure that you subscribe to his YouTube. And of course, he's on Instagram and so forth. And I put his website down below too. Which, what's that again? It's
innerworldsastrology.com.
Inner World Astrology. Talking all about that inner world that you just were.
Yeah, exactly.
Right on. Well, it was a pleasure to have you, bro. Truly appreciate it, man.
Yeah, likewise.
Make sure that you check out Evan Grimm and, of course, become a member of High Vibe to get all the exclusive horoscopes and so forth by clicking on the links down below, or, of course, on any of the apps and downloading them. I appreciate you all so much. It was awesome to have Evan here. Always put your comments down below. I'm sure Evan has no problem coming down, answering any questions, or go over to his stuff where he likes to talk to everybody and answer questions about astrology and so forth. and get readings with him at the same time too. So appreciate you all so much, and I'll see you all on High Vibe, and I'll see you all on the next time I'm around doing something that I'm always doing. You know me, I always show up out of nowhere. All right, everyone, talk to you later. Adios.